All right, seeing 5:30, I'll call the, the January 3rd Business Operations and Finance Committee meeting to order. With that, Ms. Shope, can I have a roll call?
Yes. Tia Johnson? Here. Brian Nichols?
Here.
And Brian Anderson.
Here.
All members are present.
All right. Item 1C, approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's moved by Board Member Johnson, seconded by Board Member Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed. All right, that passes. 1D is approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Nichols, seconded by Board Member Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes. Mr. Shady, how about item 2A, our October financials for the second time?
Yeah, thank you. October monthly financials are presented on the screen. We're part of the board packet in advance of the meeting as well, and my apologies. Wasn't until after the meeting that I discovered that the error was on my part, not on the numbers per se. I was looking at that middle column, fiscal year to date, and thinking that was a monthly activity column, and it's not. It's a fiscal year to date, which again, I think somewhat provides evidence of the need or the desire to be a little bit more transparent. When looking at reports as the district is accustomed to, you don't really see the activity that occurs in a given month. You only see the cumulative activity through the fiscal year to date. So again, we'll quickly review October revenues here with our operating funds with no grants. And again, taking a look at the bottom line as the most prevalent total revenues, 10.6 million fiscal year to date here in the 23-24 school year as compared to 11.1 million in the prior school year. Difference of about $500,000, $445,000 to be specific. Not really all that much to be concerned about when you look at it as a percent of budget. 11.46 as compared to 11.81 in the prior year. So pretty much on track across the board. I'll pause and ask if there's any questions specific to October revenues with no grants before I move on. All right, we'll continue onward. Let me scroll down. We'll take a look at the expenditure side of the house. So here's our expenses for the month of October of 23, excluding the grant-related expenses. Again, taking a look at total expenses, the bottom line, 15.1 million fiscal year to date in expenditures in the 23-24 school year as compared to 20.6 million in the prior school year. So a difference of about 5.5 million, which is pretty significant. When we look up that last column, look at the increases and decreases. You'll see salaries and fringe benefits down about 2.6 million, and then the purchase services down 2.2 million. The decreases in salaries and fringe benefits most likely related to both the combination of staffing reductions, staff vacancies, and then some health benefit cost savings that we had with our health insurance plan. The purchase services likely related to the movement that the district has done with moving the cleaning services, the custodial cleaning, contracted HES services out of the general fund and now using grant funds to cover those expenses through our ESSER 3 program or ESSER 3 grant. So that kind of provides the high level synopsis of October 23 expenses, excluding any grants. And again, I'll pause and see if there's any specific questions that board members may have. Hearing, seeing none, we'll continue on and look at October grant revenues. Grant revenues for the month of October of '23, just under $20,000 on a fiscal year to date, as compared to $522,000 almost at the same comparative point in time during the '22-23 school year. So we're trailing grant revenues by about $500,000. A lot of that was likely due to ESSER II claims that were submitted earlier in the year during the '22-23 school year. ESSER II has been fully consumed, and currently we're working on ESSER III grant funds and utilizing those resources, and simply had not yet at this point in time through the end of October submitted a claim reimbursement to the DPI in those regards. So again, I'll pause and see if there's any questions on October grant revenues. Seeing none. Whoops, we'll jump down and take a look at the grant-related expenditures dating back to the month of October of '23 and the fiscal year to date. To that point in time, '23-24 total grant expenses, $4.8 million, as compared to $3.2 million in the prior fiscal year, so running about $1.6 million ahead there. And again, a lot of that is likely related to that contracted HES custodial cleaning services that we moved out of the general fund in the '22-23 school year to the '23-24, to use ESSER funds to help support those expenses. So that would drive that additional $1.6 million increase in expenses there. And I'll do a pause again and see if there's any questions on October.
I got one thing for you.
Yeah,
And this is a general question. That could be for October or November, but so, and what kind of tells the story, if you back up a couple slides to the Fund 10 and 27, no grant expense.
got it.
Okay, so, yep, we're 5.5 million under, right? And we explain, what those are, and that's great. And some of it's always gonna be timing and all that. But where on here, or on any of the financials that we have, would let yourself or the board know that we're on track? Like, do we have a monthly budget?
We don't necessarily have a monthly budget per se, no. We've got an annual budget. There are certain line items within our budget, like salaries in particular, that we can kind of schedule out. Though some of that, you have 3 payroll months and 2 payroll months. You're not going to find, I think, what you're looking for or seeking on this material that's presented to you or has been presented to you in the past. And perhaps intentionally or unintentionally, and maybe a good segue, let me jump to a couple of the other slides that are included in the board packet. So this is kind of the committee has seen this last month, I believe, for the first time. Maybe it was the second, I can't even recall. This is the proposal that we move forward to, and really what you'll see for November when we talk about that here momentarily as well. I think this reporting provides a much better and cleaner in a snapshot from Skyward, because it talks about, one, what our monthly activity is, as well as our fiscal year-to-date activity in the current year in those 2 middle columns. And then to the far right, it speaks of what the monthly activity was in the same reporting month the prior year, and with regards to a fiscal year-to-date activity for the prior year as well. So, for comparative purposes, you can scroll down and look at your monthly activity in October of '23 and see $5.8 million worth of expenses in Fund 10. You can jump over 3 columns to the right and see $5.9 million of expenses in October of '22 to kind of give you an idea as to where you're running on a month-to-month or even a year-to-year comparison perspective.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because that's exactly what I did. And so here's where you get a chance to educate me. So you do that and you say, okay, well, we spent about 100,000 less in Fund 10, made up of those items, that compared to month over month last year.
Yep.
And on the last set, we said, hey, you know what? I understand this number was a year-to-date we were looking at, so it's not apples to apples, but year-to-date, that Fund 10, no grants, so that's, and now 27's in this number too, so again, I know it's not apples to apples.
Right.
It says that year-to-date, we're down 5.5 million, and it's just, if they were kind of close, because, Fund 27, just a little bit farther down the page, is almost, it's down a little bit, it's down 50,000 over last year. So those two combined on this updated kind of new report that we're looking at, those two funds on the expense side, I just don't, unless we made up the other 5 million in September.
So I think the challenge, what you're striving to do is to reconcile the numbers between Fund 10 and Fund 27, revenues and expenses, between the two reports, as did I. But I think what we have to keep in mind is that what's displayed currently is a snapshot of no grants expenses, and then a couple of pages down is the grant expenses. And theoretically, you're correct. If we add up the expenses for those two pages, then we should be able to go to this version, and it should be able to reconcile out and tie out precisely. And I'm not sure if it does or doesn't, because I haven't really looked at it. But what I can tell you is that inherently therein is why the reason that we should move from prior reporting, as displayed currently on the screen, to perhaps the report that's generated straight out of Skyward. That way there's no, I don't want to say manipulation of the data, because I don't think that that's happening, but there may be errors in some of the calculations that are being used to create the Excel version of what's being reported to you.
Okay. So along those same lines, and I get that going between two different reports, there's that translation error, right? So
Right.
Whether it's human error,
Good way to put it.
error, or whatever.
Yep.
So now just looking at the new report again, bring that up. So on the third page, which would be the end of the expense, where the expense totals, it shows our budget expense total, 125,393,868.
Correct.
Okay, and if we go to the revenue total, a few pages later. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get to it here. Which would be the second to the last, yeah, you're there. It's 121,877,000. Now, looking at those two numbers, it looks like we passed a $4 million deficit budget, but I know we didn't do that. So what about reconciling those two numbers? And that's just budget.
So there are funds, if we come back to the expense side of the house, there are funds, probably the best example is going to be here in Fund 39, which is our referendum debt service approved, where we've got budgeted expenses of $3.4 million. And then if we come back over to the revenue report and we go up to Fund 39, you'll see that we have revenues of $156,555. So a wide extreme there. Good question as to the why. So I can't remember the value. The 3.4 million is what our obligations are for our principal and interest payments on our outstanding debt here during the current fiscal year. However, on the revenue side, we have no need to levy for additional resources because we already have the money, we have the assets necessary to fulfill that obligation.
Okay, so that's a balance sheet item on that side, and
Right, so I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring it back to that balanced budget concept. And And I think that is appropriate when you look at Fund 10, Fund 27, those operating funds.
Just not the grand total.
Right, yep,
Perfect.
okay.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'll come back to the October financials as presented in the past and ask if there's any other questions of board members. And I'll try to look to the screen to see, I see Mr. Nichols is out there and he's standing mute, so maybe that means he's okay, okay? Any other questions?
Okay.
So we'll come back to the budget report summary for the month of October real quick. Great example here. If we look at our revenue column for the month across all of our funds, we come down to the very bottom and you'll see total revenue just under $479,000. You go to the next column over, our expenses are almost $7 million. Some people would get overly concerned about, boy, you're spending $6.5 million more than you're bringing in the month. And that's typical with school districts. Typically, there's 4 months of the year that your revenues actually exceed your expenses. And those revenues occur when we receive state aid payments or when we receive local property tax payments. So on those months, typically your revenues will significantly exceed your expenses. And then you kind of cash flow it the other 8 months of the year, which is what you're seeing presented here. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions at all about the October monthly financials. If you want to address accepting and sending those to the board individually or collectively, it's up to you.
We could take separate action so that it's clear, I guess. Are there any other questions on the October financials from any committee members?
I have one, and Mr. Chady, I know you've addressed this before, I just need you to refresh my memory. Why in donation is there an expense of $1,000?
So that Fund 21, that description probably shouldn't say donation. So that's really a activity account fund that encapsulates both student activities. I'll just use a student council as an example. They hold a fundraiser, they bring in revenues, and then that group also has expenses related to that fundraiser. So Fund 21, I think technically is called Special Revenue Trust Fund. In some place along the way, it just got simplified to donation. Any other questions?
Just one more. Under Fund 80, under Community Service, in October, we have fiscal year-to-date activity, $77,430. Give you a second to get there.
Yeah, I've got you on page 2 of the expenditure report
Right.
via Skyward. Yep,
So you see the 23-24 fiscal year-to-date activity, $77,430.
yes.
So that's October. When I go to, because I happen to have 2 months to review, so when I look at November's, same line item, there's at line 310, and I guess it's going to be all of them combined, really, because there's no itemization on the October report. But then we've got only, under all of Fund 80 in November, for the month of November, $5,748.92. But yet the year-to-date activities, $83,178. I don't know, and maybe I answered my own question. You know, it's just the way that it's split up and didn't have all the same line items because you didn't have the expenses. Never mind. Thank you. You know what?
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta talk it through yourself. We're
Yeah,
good.
nope, I'm good. As you were talking it through, I was calculating it on my phone as well. I think some confusion between the October and the November expense reports that you were looking at is I did take liberty with the November expense reports and moving forward to provide a greater level of detail than we did at October, based upon the conversations that we had last month, I believe, yeah.
Perfect.
So,
All right.
yep.
I think we probably beat up October. Is there a motion to recommend sending this to the full board?
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion by Board Member Johnson, second by Board Member Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, that passes. How about November?
All right, so November, I took liberty, hopefully it's appropriate and acceptable, to kind of expand upon the framework that I shared last month with regards to the potential new reporting to use. So as part of the packet, we prepared this financial activity report that lists in here much of the same information, though I think at a more appropriate level of transparency for the board and for the public for that matter. So this monthly summary report, very similar to what the board just approved for October. You'll see, Ms. Johnson, that Fund 21 is listed as a special revenue trust instead of donation to be a little bit more clearer. We tried to use, for most of these, it appears that we tried to use the actual fund description that the DPI refers to things as. So again, looking at the monthly summary revenues and expenses, and we'll get into those details in just a minute. Total revenues for the month of November of 23, 4.1 million, as to expenses, the 7.4 million for, a difference or a shortcoming of 3.2 million. Some other things to point out. The next statement here, we talk a little bit about the total revenues for the month, which we just recited from above. But the next sentence, I think, is really important for board members to look at and to consider, and that's the fiscal year-to-date status with our revenues and expenses. And of course, that changes each month as we go through, but our fiscal year-to-date through the end of November of 23 had expenses of 29.1 million, outpacing our revenues of only 15.5 million, so a difference of $13.5 million. And again, that goes to reinforce the importance of maintaining an appropriate fund balance so that we don't have to utilize our short-term line of credit, draw upon money, borrow money, have to pay unnecessary interest expense as well. So there are months that revenues will exceed expenses, about 4 of them during the year. Of course, the desire is that at the end of June with that reporting that our revenues equal or exceed our expenses at that point in time as well. But just to kind of relay that information. The next set of information that's displayed here refers to various points that are on the revenues report or the expense reporting here that we have as well. And I'll kind of come back and talk about those in just a little bit, but I just want to kind of walk through this with you. So it has general fund, Fund 10 operation, again, under revenues, kind of a high-level picture synopsis there, and then some individual bullet points. There are some items that are highlighted in yellow so there are green highlighted items on the revenue and expense reports, which really refer to current month activity. And then I highlight items in yellow that would likely be questions that board members may ask or that the business office would look at and say, well, that's odd. What's going on there? And let's try to explain it or answer the question before the question is asked, so to speak. So we tried to identify what those interesting areas might be and provide some examples to those. So we do an overview of revenues for all of our funds, Fund 27, Fund 39, 50, et cetera. those funds, I should say, that have significant activity that occur during the month. There are other funds that also have activity, but it's rather minimal. So we just kind of cover the big pictures. And then likewise, we speak to expenditures much the same. And on the expense side of the house, when you look at the reporting there, you'll note that it talks about purchase services being a 300 series. And we felt it appropriate to give some sort of a descriptor as to what types of expenditures would be reported in that row or those line items. And again, that all kind of ties back down here to the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements. There's a book or a online accounting manual called WOOFR that's available through the link as well. Feel free. And then we get into the various expenses for Fund 10, again, looking at the high-level expenses, Fund 27, 50 as well. So that's kind of the narrative component, and I would encourage you to probably print that off, or if you've got two screens, to be able to view that on one screen while you take a look at the actual reports on the second screen. So what I'll share with you here, is our revenue reports for the month of November of '23. And again, looking at Fund 10, the stuff that's highlighted in green ties back to those items in the financial narrative report. And just as an example, you'll see interest on investments, which is source 280. We generated $57,000 plus in interest expense in the month of November. $297,000 to date as compared to $68,000 year to date in the prior year. And of course, with interest rates climbing, that provides opportunities for us. So we're doing well there. And then likewise, again, with all of the highlights, we'll just use the top one here, property tax source 211. You can see in the 23-24 monthly activity for November, there's an absence of data, but yet when you look over at the 22-23 monthly activity, you'll see $129,000 was reported as received in November of 22. Essentially, that $129,000 was booked as an accounts receivable when the property tax levy was issued, but we don't actually receive that money until January, February, or even August of the following year. What we have elected to do, and we did have conversations, I discussed this with Stephanie Elwood, my director of finance. I've never booked property tax receipts as an accounts receivable in the month that certificate was issued in November. It appears to me that Beloit has done that in the past, and it does somewhat skew your cash perspective. Because if you look at this, you think in November of 22, the district actually received $129,000 in cash, which we did not. So we've elected to account for those property tax receipts in the month of actual cash received, January, February, and August. Actually, an accounts receivable would be made in June to capture the August. But again, just kind of trying to explain the reasoning for that. And again, looking at other taxes, source 219, if we look over to last year, just under $1.3 million in receipts there. That was the closure of 2 tax incremental financing districts within the city of Beloit last year. So that was kind of a one-time infusion of cash for the district. We do have 4 TID districts that recently closed. There were proceeds from 2 of those districts that the district received. We actually received the check today, but it totaled, I believe, like $230,000. So not quite the same amount. But again, kind of looking through, the monthly reporting here, again, items identified in green can tie back to the financial activity report revenue section, as well as the yellows also. And again, just a reminder to committee members that this reporting does provide us the opportunity to compare November of current year, 23-24 activity, to November of 22-23 monthly activity, as well as the fiscal year-to-date comparisons and even the percentages comparisons between the two. The one thing that I'd love to try to do, and we can't seem to figure out how to make this happen or if it's even possible within Skyward, is to put a vertical line through here to help separate current year from those last three columns of prior year. So I actually submitted a service request to Skyward about that, and they said no can do, but thought that it might be a good addition for them. So just real quickly, kind of running through the rest of the report for revenues. Again, you'll see information here. We talk about Fund 27, our special education fund. Fund 39, again, talking about why, how come there was $11 million in receipts, property taxes in November of 22, but not in November of 23. Similar statement as we spoke to above, and then somewhat related to our conversations about the expenses between the 2 years as well. Any questions with regards to the revenue report before we move on? I don't want to rush us through, but we got a lot of stuff to cover in the next 20 minutes or so too, so. Okay. And again, along with the same reporting, just to kind of, again, here's the expenditure reports. Same type of highlighting, green referring to current month activity, yellow referring to activity that board members might have questions, or community members for that matter as well might have questions about. So again, the one addition that we did do is we expanded this report. I think if you recall, or we look back at October expenditure reports from last month, I think it was 3 pages, if I recall correctly, maybe 4. We expanded the rows of reporting here so that was more equitable to how we were displaying our revenues. Again, just providing a little bit more details to the board. And then the final thing that we have added as well is our fund balance report. That kind of speaks to where our assets are, or where the district stands on a fund balance basis. We'll just take a look real quick at the top. So again, it reports the fiscal year beginning balance. So you can think of this as a July 1st, 2023 amount of 11.7 million. Looking at the beginning of November beginning balance, we had just over 5 million. Our ending balance at the end of November, 2.7 million. And then you can even look at what the ending balance was in November of 22, just over 5 million. So again, it kind of provides that comparison from beginning balance to ending balance within the current year to where we were with the beginning balance and ending balance in the prior year as well. Very much on track, and actually looking at the ending balance, we're $600,000 stronger here in November of 23 than we were in November of 22 in our Fund 10 operations. Quick pause if there's questions. Do you like this format? It might take a little bit of time to get used to, but is it more meaningful? I think it's more transparent and open, but.
I guess I'll chime in and say, the reason I have no questions on November's is because the detail is fantastic in combination with the stuff you put in the financial activity report. And I intentionally did not read the financial activity report until I went through the raw financials to generate my questions, and they were all answered, right? So I think that was.
Tried to be a step ahead of you.
Yeah, no, you nailed it in November. I have no question. So I don't know if the thought is to continue that process going forward.
That is our preference, is to try to continue and replicate this going forward each month. And I think this is a good step. This is, in my impression, this is much further than what the district has had in the past. I think there's a couple of other steps that we can even add to this down the road. I'm not quite sure that we're there yet, and but we can look to make some enhancements to it as we go as well, so.
I like it. I would echo what Brian said. It's given us a lot more answers that we don't have to ask questions for. And I think it provides another level of transparency to the community, as well as the board. So, I congratulate what you've done up to this point. And yeah, anything, I know how these things are, anything you can tweak, it's easier to tweak going forward than it was, to get here. So that's,
Yeah, and please don't misinterpret, I'm certainly welcome to questions as they come up. Questions in advance are great because it allows us the opportunity to research and make sure that the answers that we're providing are accurate. But questions from the board table at the time are fine as well, and we just hope that we don't have to use the, I'll check into that and have to get back to you thing. But more importantly, I think, it does provide a little bit more transparency and education for all parties that might view it, so.
Sure. Board President Levy, you have a comment?
Yeah, the thing I would just say is, one of the things that, from the time that I've been serving, is that we just want to make sure that in all the things that we're doing with the district, like you said, that it makes sense and it's easily understood for board members. Like you said, as we, grapple to understand the financial position, and really in all the things that we're doing, it's been a great addition to have Dr. Garrison and others to join the team. So one of the things that we say is that we know that people will come and go in the organization, but we're trying to establish that the work is there and the frameworks of the things that should be there, set for the board level and also at the other levels of employees. Like you said, when you came in, there's things that were not there. And as you referenced earlier, the different presentation directly from Skyward, as it was referenced in the monthly school board, the article that was in the monthly school board journal that comes out. So that all those things are, just try to put things model practice.
Right.
That we can see.
Yep.
So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions from the committee on November financials? Okay, any questions from any other board members present? None? All right, I would entertain a motion for November financials.
So moved.
second.
All right, we've got a motion by Board Member Johnson, a second by Board Member Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, that passes unanimously, and we'll move on to item 3A, our audit.
Yeah, so the next items, a couple of items actually, no board action, just more informational purposes. So the district's audit was recently completed. Boy, I can't remember if it was due December 1st, December 15th to the DPI, one of those two dates. It was submitted on time for that. Board policy states that upon completion of the audit shall be presented to the board for examination and acceptance. And I believe Dr. Garrison and I are planning on the auditor, Greg Patel from Kerber Rose, to be present in person 2 weeks from yesterday. So it must be the 16th of January to do a presentation about the audit. The whole point of tonight was, one, just to make it available to you both electronically through board docs, and then members present this evening will find a copy, a hardbound copy at their workstation as well. And Mr. Nichols, I'll save a copy for you and we'll relay a physical copy to you as well. If, again, the intent's for you to peruse that document over the next couple of weeks. If you have questions, feel free to contact myself about those. Stephanie Elwood, Director of Finance, can assist with any responses to questions as well. But perhaps more importantly, that if there are questions that you have that are directed to the auditors, when Greg Patel, our CPA auditor from Kerber Rose, is present in a couple of weeks, that you have that forewarning. So again, just informational purposes, relaying it to you is really all that I have, unless anybody has questions there.
I don't see any. All right. Then we'll move on. You want to chat about recently released RFPs.
Right, and again, more just informational purposes for the committee, and perhaps somewhat a forewarning of what's to come. So the district recently released 3 RFPs, and again, just to kind of put those before the board. One was to retrofit the existing lighting at Jacobson Field to LED. As many of you are likely aware, we've had some lighting issues down at the field throughout the fall with some football games and soccer games, and needing to rent some portable lighting to bring in as well. So some upgrades need to be made there. So we've released the RFP for that, and we're expecting proposals, not expecting, proposals are due by 2 p.m. on January 15th. So in about a week and a half, 2 weeks or so, we'll be receiving those. Tommy Bricko, Director of Facilities, and I will be sitting down to review those and provide a recommendation. The intention will be to come back to the committee at our February meeting with recommendations to review, and then perhaps for that to go on to the full board. Likewise, we released an RFP for audit services. Our audit policy requires solicitation of bids every 3 years. At the completion of our fiscal year 23, the audit that you just received, that fulfilled the current engagement with Kerber Rose. Not to say that we can't renew with them if perhaps they are the vendor or the audit firm of choice, but we will go through the RFP process to determine that. Those bid proposals will be due back to the district on January 19th, and just today, Ms. Elwood, Director of Finance, and myself were addressing the 35, I believe, questions that we received from interested audit firms. So we've got answers to all those questions, and that'll be communicated to the parties tomorrow. And then the last item to share is some roof rehabilitation projects. There was an invitation to bid that was issued by our vendor. So the district has contracted with, I think it's Apex Building Solutions, Apex Building Consultants, more expertise in roofing than I do, more expertise in roofing than Tommy Bricko currently has. So we're relying upon an outside vendor to help assist with this project. With regards to, 1, identifying which sections of roofs need to be replaced, and then 2, seeking bid proposals for both labor and materials for any proposed work that may take place. And I do say proposed work intentionally, because there's nothing that says that we are going to move forward with any of those. We're simply seeking to try to figure out what the cost might be, and then from there, what our affordability is to fund some of the sections of roof replacement. The buildings being reviewed are Hackett and Aldrich, and not in their entirety, obviously. There are certain sections at both of those buildings that we have some roofing issues with that we're simply trying to remedy. So again, those proposals will be due back, I think, this week. In fact, tomorrow, it looks like. So again, I would anticipate that in February, all 3 of those items will be back before the committee with regards to an update and perhaps a recommendation as to how we move forward on all of those. Any questions there? I didn't save myself much time for the last, so we'll talk about this real quick.
Let me start.
Yeah.
So now, if you don't mind. One of the things that when we're thinking about this portion of the conversation, the Baird budget forecast model, it's a ever, and also allows Mr. Chady to get a swig of water there. I know how hard it is to stand before you all and, go at it for a bit of time here. Our goal is to make sure that people are aware of kind of how the model works. What you see in front of you, Mr. Chady will go over it as well. It's a forecast model. It is not the actual. And it's very important that we note that in this conversation, because a lot of times people see what they see and think, oh, this is what it is. And that's not the case in this model. There's projections, but as we get better with our projections, as we get better with inputting information and numbers, these things could change for the better and for the worse. Okay, and so that's something that it's very important that we note in this start. All of the reports that you all have seen today is a measure of us trying to nail down what the board actually wants to see and actually can, and digest in a X amount of time frame as well. And so hopefully, again, as Mr. Chady goes through this process or goes through this conversation, I want everybody to know that the 9, the 11, and the $12.8 million opportunities, we've already started to look at what that could actually do for us, even prior to going to referendum. And so this is part of what we do on a regular, but we also want to bring it to the committee and actually to this conversation for this space. So I'll be quiet and allow Mr. Chady to kind of walk us through what you all see here now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Garrison. So I think that the overarching things to keep in mind with the budget models, one, is a tool. It's a fairly reliable tool to use, and many districts throughout the state use a similar budget model, either from Baird or from Forecast 5 Analytics now, Frontline Technologies, and there's others out there as well. The thing to keep in mind with the models, no matter what you use, is that there are certain assumptions and estimates that are built into the model. We might forecast that, I'll just use salaries and benefits as an example. Salaries, we could budget for a 2% increase. We could budget for a 5% increase. And of course, that 5% increase is going to cost us more. So in the 24-25 year, boy, and I can't recall if we used maybe it was 4.25% increase. Trying to identify or trying to estimate what the CPI value might be in those given years. In 25-26, I think we backed it down like a quarter, so that might be 4%. And then in 26-27, I think we backed it down another quarter, so it might be 3.75%. And I'd have to go back into the model to look to see exactly what happened. If anybody knows what health insurance expenses are going to do next year, please let me know, because I think we're estimating it at like 8 to 10%, but I've been in districts that it's come back at 18%. And I've been in districts where you might estimate it at 8 to 10% and it comes back high and you make some plan changes and you can get it down to like 4% as an expense. But of course, that reduction also comes in a reduction in benefits to the employees too. So you got to kind of balance that out. So there are a lot of assumptions. How many students we're going to have next year? We don't know. We can look at historical averages and we can make a predictable guess as to what number we should utilize for future years. In fact, here you can see that. So in September, the top row, in 22-23, we had 5,803 FTEs. In the current year, we got 5,707. Boy, 5,600 and 100 decrease each year thereafter seems reasonable and appropriate, but it might be less than that. It could be more than that. What the model does do is it gets you in the ballpark of what your financial position is. And if we look at this, you can see in the middle of the page, there's a Fund 10 revenues, a Fund 10 expenses, and then your surplus and deficit row. So these three rows are really where you want to focus your attention and probably more importantly, that surplus deficit. Current year, 23-24, you can see we're balanced at 0. Next year, we anticipate facing about a $10.9 million budgetary deficit based upon the assumptions and the estimates that the model's currently using. We think they're, I don't want to say accurate, we think they're reliable. I don't think we're overly inflating numbers. I don't think we're being conservative in any areas either. So I think it's a reliable number to look at, but it may change, and may is not even a good word there, it will change as things become known. Here in about 4 to 6 weeks, we'll know what the CPI is for salaries effective July 1st of 2024, because that's based off of January 1st numbers released by the Department of Workforce Development, Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission here within the state. So as you look at this model, you can see, okay, a $10.9 million deficit in 24-25, and it goes forward, and we look at 25-26. And then that deficit increases to 11.6. It increases to 12.4 in the 26-27 school year and 13.2 in 27-28. $14.6 million deficit in the 28-29 school year. The model provides 5 years' worth of snapshot or look forward. That's great. Perhaps it's most important to look at the next 3 years. So again, other information here, the next row down talks about fund balance percent of expenditures. At the very bottom, it talks about your tax levy and your mill rate. So this, if you look in the upper right corner, you'll see it says base, and on the upper left, it says the base scenario. So this scenario is essentially taking our 23-24 budget as it stands today, and then building in those estimates and assumptions that we anticipate moving forward in what the future holds for us. The great thing about the model is really that we can make changes to that and we can compare scenarios. So if we come down a little bit on the first page, here is the scenario with a $9 million non-recurring referendum referred to as scenario 1 here. And again, with $9 million additional dollars added in the revenue row, if you look at the surplus deficit row, you can see that in 24-25, our deficit's 1.8, almost 1.9 million. In 25-26, the deficit's 2.6 million, and in 26-27, the deficit would be 3.4 million. So if you compare the two, the base model with no recurring support, quite substantial deficit challenges, versus scenario 1 here, $9 million non-recurring, we still have deficits. Not saying at all that we're going to run those budgets in those years at a deficit position. What that tells us is that we need to make reductions that equal at least those amounts to bring that down to a balanced budget position. The question of how and where those reductions would need to be made is still to come. So when we were playing with the model, and we actually started playing with the model just about the same point in time that the referendum survey was going out to the public. I can't quite remember how that aligned, but so we used 9 million, 11 million, and we ran a scenario based on 11 million. And you can see with an $11 million operating referendum, in the first year, we actually have $121,000 surplus, but again, a $600,000+ deficit in year 2 and a $1.4 million deficit in the 26-27 school year. We also ran the scenarios, what's going on? Here we go. We also ran the scenarios with a $12.8 million non-recurring referendum. That's kind of the magic number, or actually a little bit less than that would be the magic number of the amount that we would need to ask if we were to ask for sufficient funds from the public so that no reductions were necessary or needed. I don't think that's where the district is, but just to kind of put it into perspective for the board, that if there was a desire to seek a referendum value that would not necessitate any cuts or changes in programming, we would essentially be looking for an amount in the proximity of about $12.5 million a year.
Let me just add to, these scenarios, again, one of the things that no one wants to do is to get into the thought of inflated numbers, but also a tolerance conversation is also part of the thought and what we possibly will need. And I understand in our school district, there is a need to, make sure that we are tight with our finances, but I'm also wanting to make sure that people understand, and I've stated this before, that it is our responsibility to still provide the highest services, all the while still meet our needs of academic achievement. And so each of these scenarios gives us a different thought process. And so in the referendum mindset, that's why the survey looks as it does. It provides us to say what $9 million could possibly do, what $11 million could possibly do, what $12.8 million could possibly do. And again, there's a needed conversation around that as we continue to go through our referendum conversation. And so I wanted to make sure that I added that thought because, again, these numbers weren't just, hypothetically speaking, just throw it on a paper, but also looked at what is it that we actually need, and not, let's say, go beyond that, but also look at where we could possibly make changes if the numbers weren't, if we don't come in at the, let's just say 12.8 as a request.
One last comment that I'll offer, and then I'll open if there's any questions before we wrap up the committee tonight. So if we're looking at the $9 million scenario as an example, again, looking at the deficit amounts in the 3 years, 24-25 through 26-27, that middle number, deficit of $2,662,560. I'll use that as an example. If we were to see approval at the $9 million level, and if we could make reductions in the 24-25 next school year of approximately $2.6 million, you actually then end up with a slight surplus in 24-25. 25-26 becomes balanced at zero, and the 26-27 amount becomes less by about $700,000. My point is that you have a slight surplus in the first year that then you save to cover your deficit amount in year 3 in order to make it through the 3-year period of time. So you're essentially moving forward your expense reductions by a year higher than necessary, but because you have recurring expenses, then in year 2 and year 3, the expenses decrease so that you can get through the 3 years less painfully is probably the best way to put it. And I'm not sure that I explained that well, but I know time's running short, so I'm going to stop. Any questions about the scenarios? If you do, you know where to find me.
Well, Board President Levy has a comment, question?
Well, just kind of the question, like you said, of course, as we're looking at the 9 million, that's if people support that.
Correct, right. So these 3 scenarios are fairly tightly aligned. I don't know that they're specific to the referendum survey that went out.
Right.
We tried to get them as tight as we could. Yeah.
Yeah, because that, like I said, if you go back to the base, that, the base is populated with numbers that we currently have. And so, sometimes it just, bears repeating, unless we're going to cut 10 million or close to $11 million next year. That's why we already decided we need to ask for something.
Right. The base model essentially foretells what's to come for the district over the next 5 years in absence of any additional referendum authority or other revenues.
So that would be, hey, make an $11 million cut. Now make another $11 million. I mean, so that's the space of where we're at in that. With the scenarios, if I go back down to the 12.8 million though, even though 9 and 11 are options, and I know we're going to hear from school perceptions later this evening, of the scenarios that are presented, it is only the 12.8 million that in the next 3 years keeps us out of a deficit, correct? Or as I'm seeing that, or
Well, yeah, it's twofold.
putting us in the best position for the
There you
next
go.
3
The
years.
12.8 is, again, this is, again, if everything was to remain consistent, no changes, all.
But we
Right,
know
and
they're going to be
We
changes.
know
right?
there's going to be changes. We know that there's moving pieces in this. That's why this is a forecast model, as I stated from the beginning. So the 12.8 could be, 12.5 could be what we actually need.
Right.
Yep.
But it could be much more than that as well.
Right.
Based off of whatever is happening here in the school district, with many different moving pieces. And so it's also, and I know we're going to conclude with this thought. Thank you so much, Mr. Chady. It's also very important to note that our goal is to get information into the people's hands so that people can make an informed decision, so that the public can make the best informed decision, not only with the referendum, but also as we have conversations at the board level.
Right, because I saw that last one too with the, back to the base scenario. Fund balance is depleted when in the base scenario? Like, there's 1 year and then there's not enough to cover.
Yeah, so fund balance, if we were to operate the 24-25 in a deficit position, fund balance would nearly be depleted at the end of the 24-25 school year, though I don't think that's our intent, so.
No.
Right.
Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns? All right. Thank you, Dr. Shady. In that case, we'll move on to item 4A. Our next meeting date for this committee will be February 6th at 5:30 PM. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion from Board Member Johnson, second by Board Member Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, we are adjourned. The HR committee meeting will begin in just a few minutes.
I'm about to use this man's room real quick and we can get started whenever you're ready.
People understand. Okay. All right, if everybody's ready, we're going to go ahead and get ready to get started here. We're going to get ready to get started. And I get myself off the. All right. Okay, I'm going to call the January 3rd, 2024 Human Resources Committee meeting to order at 6:36 p.m. Mrs. Shope, could I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Megan Miller, Brian Anderson,
Here?
Brian Nichols,
Here.
Tia Johnson,
Here.
and Sean Levy.
Here.
All members are present except Megan Miller.
Is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll provide a second.
Okay, so we've got a motion by Board Member Nichols and a second by Board Member Levy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Schneider and seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, the motion passes unanimously. We're on to item 2A, discussion information. Is there a need to go to closed session for anybody? Okay. So we're up to reclassification of position. Is there administration, any presentation or introduction to this?
So at the last conversation, we had a conversation around this position. We wanted to bring it back to make sure that there was any additional questions that we needed to answer, or if there was any additional commentary that we needed to provide, so that we could possibly move forward with this action item. However, I do want to make sure that everyone is very cleanly aware that it is our goal to, service all the families in this conversation, not picking one over the other. It's all families. And so with that being stated, that's the position that we started with in our last conversation. That's the position in which we are in right now. So nothing has changed. I know it sounds crazy since last year.
Okay, I do have Board Member Miller's not here, but she did ask that a question be asked in public. She's just asking for clarification about the expanding of the position, bilingual homeschool liaison, and making the role Spanish-speaking preferred. She wants to ensure that people understand that there's resources for families, even though this position has been reclassified. And she's asking, what staff do we have who are compensated appropriately to support translating in the event that there were an English-speaking homeschool liaison who needed support for a family?
So I'll start off with the first thought. Again, our goal in this conversation is to service all of our families in the school district of Beloit. And so that's the first part of her question. And I want to make sure that's very clear, as we've stated that before once and again last year. Secondly, when it comes to the preferred statement of whether or not it should be preferred versus required, when in the expansion, it's within itself, the preferred is still preferred. I'm not sure how else to state that. It's still a preferred that we will love for our people who apply for this position in the near future or beyond in the future, right? That the Spanish-speaking piece is still preferred. We didn't want to take that off the table. We also didn't want to make it a requirement. because again, we didn't want to assume that I can't or whomever can't serve a family based off of being bilingual or not. The preferred piece is there for a reason. We do want our families to know that all of our families to know that the preferred position that we have in place today is there for a reason to make sure that all our families can be served. And that this was coming from, and I'm gonna slow my thoughts down just a little bit, and that it was coming from being bilingual homeschool liaisons into the family advocate position. We didn't want to lose the heart of the position as well as we added more responsibilities to the conversation. And so that preferred position stands because we believe it's the right position for this overall position, and that we do service, nearing 40+% in our school district demographics of Spanish-speaking backgrounds. And so that's the preferred thought. I may didn't answer it in the most clear way, but again, we have it there because we do believe that it's necessary in our conversation for the family advocate. I think the third part of Mrs. Miller's question is, I think you mentioned the funding. Is that what?
Right. I think it's something.
About people being properly compensated for translation, so you're not just depending on any Spanish speaker to do something out of a job classification or something like that.
Sure. And so we've always, again, when I'm thinking about servicing families, we've always wanted to serve all of our families at the highest level, period, across the board. In this conversation, especially when we're thinking about translation services, I've never been in a school district where we didn't try to meet the needs of the students or families in which they come to us with, whether it's Spanish speaking, whether it's Hmong speaking, or whatever the background may be. And so if there is a need for us to continue to look at different compensation services for additional pay or contracted services for additional need that we may have, that's something that we would have to look at on a regular basis. But right now, I do believe we are able to service all of our families, to the best of my knowledge, with what we currently have. And so I don't think that we're stepping outside of our periphery and having it set up this way.
Other board members with questions?
I just want to be clear on what we're voting for here. So my understanding is we've got an existing description that ties to a programming to help communicate with our Hispanic-speaking population. That was kind of the intent of this several years ago. And from what I've heard, it works very well. It's been very successful. So is it the intent that level of service not fall off, but what's additive to making this change? What more are we trying to do than what we're doing right now?
The change is in addition to, not in lieu of. And so our goal is to continue providing the same excellent level of service to our Hispanic families. However, with the family advocate reclassification, we are now going to also look into expanding our services. Not everything is a demographic or a race. There could be an individual who is any race, even if the person is white, who may not be literate and may need services to assist with any communications that may be sent home. And so it's expanding upon that so that we're serving the needs of the community in addition to our Hispanic families.
Are all those roles fully occupied right now? Or do we have vacancies?
No, it's fully staffed.
Okay, so with this, is there the intention to hire additional FTE?
That is the future goal of this program. So when it first rolled out, one of the things that we did not know, as happens with a lot of things, is exactly how well the program is going, how successful it will be. And so the program for the Hispanic community has been very successful to date. And so if we're able to identify the additional gaps, we can then at a later time come back to the board and add additional FTEs as may be needed. Until then, it will be serviced by our existing staff.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you. I believe that the intent of Ms. Miller's question was to say that since being bilingual was moved from required to preferred, we could in the future, or currently, I'm not certain, have staff members that are not bilingual. And she just wanted to assure the public that we have translation services in the district, so there wouldn't be a gap or a deficiency in serving parents. I believe that's the point that she wanted to be made clear. Your comment raised another question for me. So I pulled up my notes from our December 19th meeting, and my specific question was the target audience to receive services from the bilingual homeschool liaisons is our Hispanic community. What are the target audiences to receive services under the expanded role? And the answer I received was other minority groups. I just want to be clear because I believe you said that the goal was to service all of our families. Absolutely, overall, that is the district goal, to service all of our families. I don't think it's fair or realistic to say that our family advocates are going to service all of our families. So I just wanted to be clear in that conversation. I think it's wholly appropriate and makes sense to have certain staff that work with targeted populations. And if you do that, then all of our students collectively will be serviced. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, the questions that I have, I see that there's not a pay range for the position. So my question is there a concern that bilingual employees in this role may be asked to perform additional duties with respect to translation that others in the role who are not bilingual won't be asked to do, and not receiving additional compensation for that?
So the answer to that, so this is pretty much step one. After we assess the needs, one of the things that have been discussed with TLE is putting in place a stipend, of course, bring to the board to compensate additionally for the bilingual skill set.
Perfect, thank you so much. So that may be added to the addendum matrix.
Correct.
Perfect. And then my other question, which I believe I asked on the 19th, but I just wanted to be very clear and get it out there. How are required and preferred qualifications established, just in general? And I see that we have both of those on this job description. And has that model been followed for this, now that we're looking at this again?
So the required and preferred, the required matches pretty much 100% of what the job duties will be under the job description, what is considered to be the skill set necessary to perform the job duties identified within this job description. The preferred qualifications, of course, additional college experience is always a benefit to the district. Being bilingual in English and Spanish, as we discussed, is a tremendous benefit to the district as well to continue serving our Hispanic population. And individuals who have prior experience in this field of work is also a great preferred qualification. So when we look at hiring individuals, the preferred qualifications would be considered in addition to the required as a priority. So obviously if you have all of the required and have one, two, or all of the preferred, you will be a more desirable candidate than someone who only has the required.
Thank you. And then I just have two other questions. Duties and responsibilities, number 6, includes transporting parents/students, but there's no mention of requiring a valid driver's license in the requirements. So that's just a concern of mine, and I'm wondering why that is included if there's not a requirement to have a valid driver's license.
That is a very good observation, and I will be sure to make sure it is included. Thank you.
Okay, so we're, just so we're on the same page, we are going to keep, as part of the job description, transporting parents and students.
Yes.
And then add to the required portion a valid driver's license.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted everyone to be clear on that if we're voting on this tonight, that that would be an edit. And then is it the expectation of the district that the family advocates will use their personal vehicles to transport parents and students, or will that be a district vehicle? And the only reason I ask is because I know that that's an additional screening process if individuals are driving, which I learned recently, district vehicles.
Correct.
We would prefer district vehicles to be used. And I ran across this same thought too, like, typically we wouldn't want people transporting in our own vehicles if a district vehicle is available. And so that would require the come here to go back, to come back conversation.
And I'm sure this is a reminder and not breaking news for anyone, but there is policy that covers that. There's a process that you need to go to in order to transport students in your personal vehicle. And I'm assuming that wouldn't be the case if you're transporting adults, but we may need to look at that policy in light of these duties, because it is for the district. Even though they're adults, we're transporting people for the district, which we did not consider when we recently reviewed that policy. So if someone could make note of that we may need to revisit it. And just a heads up, I'm sure, again, this is not breaking news, but since we are transitioning current employees over to this new role potentially, if the screener is a disqualifier, how does that impact employment?
So this particular piece, we have Crystal Silva. She's one of our bilingual homeschool liaisons / family advocates who is here tonight, and she can speak more to that transportation piece on their behalf.
So currently, the liaisons have participated in home visits. That's always something that we do with another employee of the district. So it's never something that we have done on our own. And so that is something that is open to the district. And so those that want to partake in transportating any student or parent, they have to fill out a form. And so that's kind of voluntary.
Okay, so home visits wouldn't require transporting a student. That would be the district employee going to someone's home to visit them. So are you saying that transporting students is already occurring with the bilingual home liaisons?
Not at this time. So this is something that is new. This is according to the family advocate role.
Okay, I'm sorry, then I'm completely confused. Could you repeat the part that you're adding?
So what I'm adding is currently this is something that would be new because the bilingual liaisons only participate in home visits. And that's always with another employee of the district.
Okay, yep, that's already on the sheet, but my question is, since this is new, if there is a concern with the screening process, how will that impact employment if this is a duty or an expectation of this new role?
We will definitely address with them, but we're in the business of retention, and so we will try to make sure that we retain the talent in a position that will best serve the district within the restrictions. However, given the serving level of the role, the transporting, although it's not going to be a primary duty, we would still want the person to be eligible to do so if needed.
Perfect. I just want us to keep these things in mind. And then my final question, there's no mention on the updated job description of providing non-instructional supervision for students. And I know that this was discussed at our December 19th meeting. So my question is, has the administration decided not to include non-instructional supervision as a job duty or an expectation of a family advocate?
So item number 18 was actually revised to capture the needs. So number 18 reads, maintain a collaborative mindset in assisting families, students, and building leadership by assisting with other duties as assigned. So we figured that would be the catch-all for the assistance that the buildings may need from them.
Yeah, and I see catch-alls as unforeseen things. But since this is something that we have had a discussion about, I'm just wondering, is that still an expectation from the administration's perspective that a family advocate may be called upon to provide non-instructional supervision? And when I say non-instructional, unless I'm wrong, it's my understanding, like a family advocate is not going to be called in to sub if we're running low, or to, if someone, that type of thing. So that's why I said non-instructional. So I'm just curious if this is something that we're already having discussions about, and it seemed like how we left it on December 19th is that would be a duty that could be assigned to a family advocate, why that wouldn't be listed in the job descriptions, just so people can be aware this is an expectation that we have.
Yes, the only situation with that is to be able to provide that service on a scheduled basis, to be relied upon rather than as needed based on item number 18, may pull these individuals from being available to parents that may walk in or call in for assistance, or even attend to meetings that they may be a part of for translating purposes. So it's very difficult to say you are going to do recess duty every day because their schedule may not allow it, but if they're available and the need is there, that's what that catch-all is designed to do.
Maybe I wasn't clear. And I know it's not scheduled, like every Tuesday you're going to do this. But if it, just like it's a duty that you may be called on to transport a parent or student, it's not scheduled you're doing that every day, but that's listed in the job description. If there is a possibility that I could be called on to supervise students, that's something that as an like I would want to know that that's an expectation, because it may be someone that is comfortable with all of the other aspects that's listed, but if you want me to go supervise students, that may not be, I just don't think that's the type of thing that you should spring on someone or put in a catch-all if you already have an expectation that that may happen from time to time. So I'm just curious, is there a reason why that's not included?
So again, our thoughts were to put it so that we will be able to really make sure that we were covering all of our bases instead of just saying you will be covering a class, non-instructional course if needed. The statement was put there to try to capture what could possibly happen or beyond that. And I think that's what 18 kind of did. But I also understand your thoughts as it pertains to specifically stating X, which is that they will be called upon to cover non-instructional opportunities in the district. I think I like the way it lands right now with the way we wrote it on number 4, that specific number 18. I think it gives us the latitude to use our perceived family advocates in the manner in which we believe we need to if that comes to fruition.
And again, I'm not a fan of repeating myself, so I'm going to be very brief. I'm still able to support this because I think there's so much good included here. But I just want to be clear. I don't think it's fair to put, you may be called on to supervise students and couch that in a catch-all. When we're having these conversations now, we know that's a possibility. I think you should tell people what the expectations are. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
Board Member Johnson.
Thank you, President Levy. This is a wonderful position, and the work that the people are doing is a wonderful job, and all of our families deserve to have family advocates. I really think that's a great thing that is happening. But we just had this BEA negotiation, and I'm going to go back there because we have limited number of funds. We don't know if a referendum is going to get passed yet. And this is listed as an hourly position. So at the December 19th meeting, I pointed out that this is an 8% raise on top of the 4% raise that everybody else just got. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I think all of our employees deserve a minimum of $25 an hour. We just don't have that kind of money. But then we were told that more hours needed to be added to the day, and I have no problem with that. If people are going to work more hours, they deserve to get paid per hour that much more. And then we were told more days needed to be added to the contract so they could work different summer fests, Hispanic festivals and things. And again, I think that's wonderful. I would love for all of our employees to be involved and attend different Hispanic fests. Hispanic Heritage Month is from September 15th to October 15th. I think that's a wonderful time for them to be involved. My family went to Hispanic Fests during that month. We went to the one out off Cranston and the one down on Riverside. Really wonderful things there. I just really have a hard time with this because the original salary was at $21,704. When you add the hourly rate and the extra hours, then it goes up to $26,064. That's over 20% increase. Our teachers are not getting that kind of increase. In fact, since the December meeting, I've had the pleasure of actually talking to a couple of different educators, some present in our district and some former, and the ones that I spoke to vehemently said, hey, that increase we got was a slap in the face. I am really concerned about the message we are sending to our classroom educators when we're saying we're going to give either an 8% hourly raise or a 20% salary raise. However you want to look at it, it's something that no other group got. And right now, if you look at where our problems are, primarily they're in the classrooms. I think we really need to address what's happening in the classrooms.
I would like to clarify, I know we can use the words interchangeably, but I just want to be clear that this is not proposing a pay increase per se. BEA negotiations were on positions that existed, and it will be an increase, but the BEA negotiations was something that was handled by the board separate to this. This is a position reclassification, and so placing the position in the correct matrix.
And when I look at the original job description that Dr. Garrison sent me and compare it to this one, I still can't justify that kind of an increase for those changes.
Any other board members? Okay. You're seeking a motion tonight, an action?
We are seeking a motion or action tonight, if the board do so choose.
Is there a motion?
I move approval of position reclassification from bilingual homeschool liaison to family advocates.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Greg Schneider. Is there any discussion? I'll just add at this point then. I think the important part, well, sometimes things will get lost in the translation of what we're doing. The administration has proposed an action to reclassify a position. We have a compensation structure that when this job changes and there's added time to it in terms of the hours worked in the day and the number of days that are worked, it is going to result in more pay, but there is also more work. Knowing that we did just come out of our BEA negotiation and we handled for our budgetary reasons, you know, one of the things that was said before is this: there's 7 people, these are the school board members, that are going to end up deciding compensation for all the people in the district, all the employees. We just had the presentation by Mr. Chady about what our finances are. Our compensation schedule is a part of a multi-process step that was set up first with study of all the positions in the organization that created the schedule, and then placing people on the schedule. And then this year, we were able to give increase to the schedule, because there's a possibility that it could have been decided by the 7 board members not to give any increases. So with our budget situation, we gave what we gave to the teacher group, and we gave what we gave to the other group. So now when the administration comes with this reclassification of position, the salary was one thing when the position was something, and now it's going to be something else. And so that's the pay that's going with it. There's always going to be, you know, the one question I had financially, and I think it's already been answered, is that, you know, as we're moving this position, I'll ask, one, how many employees are moving? But this part of the presentation was already given to us, that when these reclassifications are set, it does not blow the budget that we have. And then again, like Mr. Chady said, CPI is going to be set again this year in a couple of weeks, and we'll know what it is. And again, we'll have to make the same set of decisions. When it comes to setting the compensation, he gave us those scenarios, and we can look out the next 3 or 5 years what it'll be. So we'll see what the CPI is, and they can throw that into the formula, and we'll see whether we have the finances to reach that or not. But right now, to provide the services, we are within budget, and to provide better services to our students, which our administration is asking for, that's where this comes from. So how many people are in the position?
Currently, we have, I want to say 5.
All right, so it's 5, and like I say, it's a, you know, so something is happening different for these 5 employees because they're changing.
6.
Or these
Sorry,
these
6.
6 employees, but it's a, if we were to take any other group of employees and change their schedules the same way, the same thing would have to happen, and it would have to be within budget. So I understand that part. Anybody else for discussion before
Yeah.
we take a vote?
Just to add for discussion, like Board Member Johnson said, the difference with the reclassification per individual is $4,359.80. And with 6 positions, that's a total additional cost to the district of $26,158.80. And I get it. I don't think anyone has repeated more than me, we don't have any money. However, to put things in context, we have upwards of $100 million budget. And for me to spend $26,158.80 to service more of our families in a program that has shown to be impactful to build those connections, that's $26,000 and some change that I'm willing to support.
Any other discussion before we vote? All right, Mrs. Schultz, we have a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Tia Johnson,
Nay.
and Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-1.
All right, we're on to 3A, employment recommendations. Is there a need for anyone to go into closed session? All right, is there a motion for Exhibit A and B? Okay.
I move approval of Exhibit A.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Board Member A. Levy, seconded by Board Member Greg Schneider. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those...
no, I-
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, I
Gotcha.
just wanted to
You got it.
point out, we are losing educators. Just a reminder, we are losing classroom educators.
Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion passes unanimously. We're on to our next meeting date. Our next meeting date is Tuesday, January 16th at 6:30 PM. And is there a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Tia Johnson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion passes unanimously. We'll start our regular meeting at 7:15. All right, we're going to get ready to start. Get the filling forms out. Get all board members present. All right. All right, I'm going to call to order the January 3rd, 2024 regular board meeting at 7:16 p.m. And I'll also read our public announcement. The Board of Education would like to let our families and viewers know that our regular board meetings are being simultaneously interpreted. You can watch the Spanish interpreted meeting through the link found at the board website under the Watch Meetings tab with tonight's date. In order to accommodate this interpretation, we will be monitoring the pace of our meeting to allow time for the interpretation, and I would like to remind our board members and others speaking to please speak one at a time. Thank you so much for your consideration and understanding. Mrs. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Tia Johnson,
Present.
Brian Nichols,
Here?
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Megan Miller, Amy Levy,
Here.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
and Sean Levy.
Here.
All members are present except Megan Miller.
Okay. Item C, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Schneider, seconded by Board Member Nichols. Is there any discussion?
I do have one question. Is there a reason the information for school perceptions community-wide survey review is not attached for review prior to the meeting?
Yes, we had our last conversation yesterday, and we were still updating the presentation, and so that's why it's not attached. I do have copies for the board up here, but I will be uploading the conversation at a later time
To board docs?
to board docs.
Thank you.
Okay. That was a discussion. All right. Anybody else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion passes unanimously. I'll lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. We all stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We are now at public comment. Mrs. Shope, do we have public comment this evening?
Well, the only thing I have is somebody yielding time for another person, but I didn't get anybody to turn in anything saying they wanted to speak, so,
Okay.
and I didn't have any other email other than the one yielding time. So I
Okay.
don't know how you want to, I don't know if Sadara
Do we
is
have
here
public
today
comment?
wanting to speak. That's what the time was being yielded for. So,
You got to fill out the form then. We have somebody has to fill out the form. Yeah. So I'll read the public content as that is going. If you intend to speak, you have to fill out the form. The Board of Education meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the business of the schools. The board, as representative body of the School District of Beloit, wishes to provide an avenue for any individual to express interest in and concern for the schools. Accordingly, the public is invited to attend any sessions of the board or any meetings of board committees. At every regular meeting of the board, time is set aside for the personal presentation of individual or group comments. Each person wishing to speak during this time shall complete the public comment card with first and last name, home address, and including city and state, if other than Wisconsin, the topic to be addressed, and whether you are speaking for or against this topic. The comment card shall then be given to the board secretary for entering into the public record. Each person will be given up to 3 minutes to speak on their topic of interest or concern. Should the individual require translation assistance, a translator may be of the individual's choosing or one provided by the district. Public comments requiring translation will be given 6 minutes. The Board of Education asks that individuals complete the public comment card, give it to the board secretary, and approach the microphone when called upon. Citizens are offered the opportunity to email their public comments to publiccomments@sdb.k12.wi.us from the time the meeting is posted until noon on the day the board meeting is in order to be read aloud during the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you. All right, and there's another part. Our norms for participation. Norms for public comments during board meetings. Members of the public are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Robert's Rules of Order will be followed at all times. Individuals attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Individuals wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and ordered meeting and to prevent discussion of confidential matters in a public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not district employees, students, or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Speech that is belligerent, disorderly, disruptive, repetitive, or which exceeds the allowable time permitted for each speaker is prohibited. Concerns or questions that entail the disclosure of identifying information regarding specific students are prohibited. Response from the board, if any, will be limited to clarifying inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the speaker, or acknowledging that the speaker has been understood. The board will not debate with an individual, and the board may not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting notice/agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule an individual who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the individual's opportunity to address the board will end immediately, and the microphone will be turned off. Thank you for your participation and courtesy. Mrs. Schultz, do we have public comment?
I do.
All right.
The first person I have is Asha, or Aisha.
The speaker part to make it come on. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to speak on my personal experience at West Osha High School on December 14th. I can handle not having a host guide our players to the locker room to get ready for the game. They're used to that. I don't mind unbalanced team fouls from the referees. Sometimes that's part of the game. I can handle the referees silencing the coaching staff for simply cheering on our players. I don't even have a problem with being ejected and then unejected from the game within a 2-minute span. I'll even take it a step further and say that many of us, as Black women and men, are desensitized to the pain and frustration that comes with racial slurs and stereotypical behaviors such as monkey noises and gestures. But what I cannot handle is an abuse of power. The U.S. Department of Justice program defines abuse of power as the misuse of a position of power to take unjust advantage of individuals, organizations, or governments. That evening, on December 14, 2023, Athletic Director John Lind and Superintendent John Gendron allowed the JV referees to abuse their power. It is never okay for a referee to be within inches of a coach's face, wagging their finger and demeaning them. While the athletic director was sitting nearest the West Osha bench, the superintendent was sitting nearest the Beloit Memorial bench and decided to turn a blind eye to the fact that the referee was not only harassing but assaulting the head coach, Delana Johnson. You see, battery happens physically, but assaulting can happen both physically and verbally. Our coaching staff was assaulted. And to take it a step further, the superintendent chose to summon the security resource officer over to go handle the head coach, rather than help him diffuse the referee's irate behavior. I understand everyone wants the girls' memorial basketball
program to move on and continue to stand strong and comply with policies and regulations. But when is enough enough? At what point do we need to take a closer look at who is in these positions to protect teams and stop hoping and wishing that it happens? I sincerely hope that the WIAA, including our conference commissioner, Tim Owens, looks at the demographics of BMHS and the rest of the Southern Lakes Conference and starts to take harassment, discrimination, and racism seriously. The girls just want to play basketball, and I just want to coach. Thank you.
Do we have more public comment?
Next, I have Dalia.
Good evening. My name is Julia Barber. I am a student at Blair Memorial High School and a player on the girls' varsity basketball team. On December 19th, 2023, at West Tosha Central High School, our players, supporters, and coaching staff experienced discrimination, racism, and disrespect from the officials and opposing supporters. While the varsity team was watching the game, we were already getting judged as we were simply just cheering on our team. During the game, the refs were making unfair one-sided calls and harassing and threatening our coaches for simply just coaching. Seeing the refs communicate with our coaches very roughly had me on edge watching the JV game. I had to mentally prepare myself knowing I had to play next. At the end of the JV game, I personally witnessed an official come up to one of our coaches in an aggressive manner, waving his finger in her face and stated, "I should have ejected you too, but it's too late now, so you would just sit there and shut up." Then, multiple officials and officers started talking to our parents and fans in an unnecessary way. As a very diverse team, this made us feel uncomfortable and unsafe, and we decided to exit the game. The West Social Central staff were trying to make us leave out of the back door, which is not the way we entered. While leaving through the front entrance, there were fans and students lined up cheering, waving us off, and making gorilla noises and gestures towards us. The West Social staff did nothing to stop this. In fact, they watched and didn't take any action, but still had the audacity to call us the aggressors. As a 15-year-old freshman, I did not expect to have to experience the firsthand racism and blatant disrespect while playing the game that I love. This is not acceptable at all. This degrading behavior shouldn't and will not be tolerated. We don't deserve to be treated like this, nor does anyone else. We demand change and equitable basketball experiences. We should be able to play the sport we love without having to fear for our safety and experiencing racism and disrespect. We hope that the rightful consequences are received and that this never happens again to us or anyone else. Thank you.
Next, I have Lanaya.
Hi, my name is Lanaya Price, and on December 15th, from the beginning of us walking into the gym to us walking out, was a horrible experience at West Tosha, whatever school it's called, high school. At first, when we had walked in, we wanted to know where the locker room was, and they all looked at us like we were crazy. And when we also was in there playing the game, there was unnecessary calls and unnecessary fouls for no reason when there wasn't nobody. Like, there was a 3-second violation. Nobody was in the lane, so it was just very confusing. Also, it made us very uncomfortable watching my coach have to sit there while the ref was in her face just for also cheering us on and actually doing nothing. She was sitting there with her playbook, and the ref came up to her for no reason and started yelling at her face. We was all trying to calm everything down, and I turned around and the athletic director is laughing. Everyone's laughing. Nobody's trying to help anything. The cop is standing there telling us to calm down when we're really just asking them to help us out. Like, we wasn't really all hyped up or anything. And I just feel like we only come to play basketball. We don't come to make anyone feel uncomfortable. So I feel like we shouldn't have to go to schools and feel uncomfortable playing the game, because then we won't feel safe. That can mess up us playing or anything. And I just really hope there is a change. after today or after this whole thing is done, because nobody in this room deserve it. Nobody at other school deserves racism or any of that, discrimination, none of that. And yeah, thank you.
Next, I have Sophie.
Hi, my name is Sophie Alverson. I'm a player at Beloit Memorial High School. I play at the varsity level. During the beginning of the season, I injured myself and tore my AITFL. I had to get surgery, so I am out for the whole season. But I stick along the coaches, and I experience almost everything that the coaches experience. I hear everything that they say. What the players do, I see how they react to everything. So it's a very different point of view from playing and then being on the bench injured and being by coach's side. But there was another incident while we played Edgerton, and the referees were not acknowledging our coach's calls. So my coach had to get the referee's attention by going all the way down the court as she was yelling to call a timeout. And there was no disrespectful meaning that my coach had, but then the referee decided to start yelling in my coach's face and saying disrespectful words and kept continuously yelling in her face. And so I myself physically had to go up and separate them because he would not step away. And I was not at the December 19th game at Waterford. It was my birthday. And when I heard about the incident, I was really upset that this had happened. That shouldn't have happened to my players because this is my family. My coaches are my family. My whole team is my family. So as that happening to them, even though I wasn't there, still affected me. And for the other school to be doing gestures like that towards a team that's very diverse is very unnecessary. And I feel like there should be a change in this whole thing because we just want to play basketball, like everyone's saying. We want to play the game that we love, that we've been playing for our whole entire lives, and that we've been playing together for almost 2-3 years now. So for myself and for our whole team, I please hope that you guys acknowledge what we say tonight and what has happened into causing this whole thing. Thank you.
Next, I have Gianna.
Hi, my name is Gianna Griffin, and I am a player at Beloit Memorial High School on JV1. And the day of the Westosha game, I was injured in the first half, and when I got injured, I was on the floor crying and stuff. And I look up, and everybody laughing. The cheerleaders laughing like something funny. When somebody get hurt, y'all supposed to show some kind of empathy. Even you step on a dog, you show some empathy. So to me, that was letting me know that y'all see not only me, but everybody else, something below animals. But when my team received more than just a lack of respect on the day of the Westosha game. From within the game until we left, we were subjected to several instances of racial profiling. However, this doesn't suffice to classify our experience as racism. However, this was it racism when the referee invaded my coach's face while waving a finger all up in her face, toppling over her? Or was it racism when we were instructed to leave out the back door even though we came through the front? When was the racism and blatant disrespect present? When is it? The question isn't when was it there, the question is when wasn't it there? From the moment we stepped into that school, we were judged. by the way they were looking at us, they couldn't even tell us. The cheerleaders and all them students told us they didn't know where the locker room is. Let's be so for real. How you ain't know where the locker room is in this your school? Now you just playing in our face. Okay. But not only that, the referees was calling like unnecessary fouls, like just doing too much. But they really took it too far when they was ejecting our coaches, unejecting them, and then just doing too much, okay? And then when we were leaving, they was making monkey noises and gestures, and we still didn't say nothing to them. And I just think we too far into this. They know it's wrong. We know it's wrong. So why is it continuously happening? When will enough be enough? That's all.
Next, we have Camille.
Hello, everyone. My name is Camille Thomas, and I would like to reflect on the situation that our girls' basketball program experienced while attempting to compete at Westosha High School. So I've never experienced this type of behavior, and I honestly never want to experience it again. To be degraded as a program was hurtful and sad when all we want to do is play basketball. We just want to play. That's all. So can we just ask for the support of our board members in making this right? Thank you.
Next, I have Sadara, and she has 3 additional minutes from Asharia.
Hello. My name is Sadira Richardson. I'm a captain on the varsity team. And what we experienced at Westosha High School, it was like I just want to play basketball. I don't want to have to go through this every single time we go to a away game. Like, majority of the teams are predominantly white. Like, we don't want to just think that, I don't want them to just think that we're just gonna flat out think as soon as we get up in there they're just being racist when the refs are doing calling bad calls. I just want it to be even. I just don't want them to think that we're just always being racist. I just want to play basketball. I just want this to get handled correctly. I want them to take accountability for what they did and just not let it happen again, because like Gianna said, we know it's wrong, they know it's wrong, so just let's fix it and just play the game that we love and we always put our time into, because I do not appreciate not missing 2 games. That's just wasting opportunities for all of our junior players that's trying to get out of here and go to college next year. And we put too much time into this game to just be sitting out just because of some refs just doing some inappropriate things with their overusing their power type stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Next, I have Joycelyn.
Good evening. My name is Jocelyn Tibbetts, a junior captain for all 3 years at Beloit Memorial varsity level. I will be speaking on the situation happening December 14th at Westosha Central High School. I would just like to start off and say that we're all pretty disappointed in not being able to play because of the traumatic experience that this has held on us mentally. I really feel as if we are not wanted in this new conference. This conference is predominantly white, while Beloit is a school filled with minorities. Mind you, our Beloit Memorial girls team basketball team is all minorities. Why are we treated like this? Because of the color of our skin? Nothing is going to change because no one is speaking up besides the team and my coaches. It's crazy that we have to deal with things outside of our control during a basketball game. All we want to do is play basketball. We could tell we weren't wanted because right when we walked into Westosha, no one spoke or directed us in any shape or form. This experience has showed us that we are not wanted in this conference due to the athletic director activities during this situation. What athletic director lets this happen? Says nothing? Does nothing? Then the superintendent laughs in front of our face. If we were to play, things would have got way worse, like an injury. I would love to play Westosha at a neutral place where everything can be fair. My teammates, family, coaches, spectators, and everyone who attended that game were in an unsafe environment. This is unacceptable, and we should not be treated this way. I hope this conference can adapt to us having us here in this conference, and there will be a result of these actions of Westosha Central High School. Thank you.
My apologies, Jocelyn. Alicia?
Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Anderson, and I'm a part of the Lady Knights basketball program. Although I wasn't at the event that occurred Tuesday, December 19th last year, I've seen how it affected my coaches and teammates. No one should ever have to go through what they went through. It's not okay. It's also not the first time where something like this has happened. March 3rd of last year, our boys basketball team played against Muskego High School, where similar events happened. The longer nothing is done about these actions, the more time they think it's okay. We're responsible, respectful young student athletes who just want to play basketball. We have done nothing to deserve this and just want change. Thank you.
Next, I have Nina.
Hi, my name is Nina Ha. I'm a basketball player for BMHS school. We were playing the game like usual at the start. Refs then started giving random fouls. I admit they had a few good fouls, 2 to 3 decent. The foul count was 6 or 7 to 0 first half. To be very honest about my feelings, I was upset about the discrimination and racism because the refs started giving our coaches texts for cheering on our team. Our teammate also got injured during the game. Not only did the refs not stop the game, we had to call for a timeout. The cheerleaders were making fun of our injured teammate as well as a special needs girl on their own team. When our coaches got the first tech, and when she got back, one of the officials got into her personal space and started to grade her. On top of that, not only did an officer that was watching the game stepped in with his hand on his holster without even speaking to anybody to, well, I don't really know, to try and de-escalate the situation. Our coaches could tell we were upset, and they were too. They didn't want to give up on this game, but in the end, the discrimination was so much we had to leave. When we got our stuff, they then told us we could not enter the way we came and told us to go to the back exit. Our coaches were fed up and said, "We are not going to the back exit, we're leaving where we came from." So we left. While we were leaving, they started cheering and they made monkey noises and gestures. This was truly disgusting because we didn't say anything back. They were treating us inhumanely. We are not caged animals, we are humans too. Thank you.
And the last speaker I have is Tyree.
Hi, I'm Tyree Earl. I am coming at you from not only a coach's perspective, from a father's perspective, from a leadership perspective, and as an educator. I'm a teacher at Fruzen Middle School here in Beloit, Wisconsin, and I'm coming to speak about the incident that happened on December 19th, 2023 at Westosha Central High School involving our girls basketball team. The experience our team, coaching staff, and my 10-year-old daughter encountered during this event was deeply unsettling and marked by a series of uncomfortable and unfair circumstances that escalated into a hurtful racial situation. From the onset, there was a noticeable lack of welcoming or guidance for our basketball team upon arrival at Westosha Central High School. Instead of the customary assistance usually extended to visiting teams, we face a discerning atmosphere which inquiries were met with dismissal and attitudes and unhelpful responses. As the game unfolded, there were numerous instances that raised concerns. The officiating during the game seemed questionable, with several calls appearing biased against our team. Moreover, there were distressing incidents involved in the treatment of our injured player and unwarranted technical fouls assessed to our coaches. The situation took a drastic turn during a timeout when one of the officials' behavior towards one of our coaches escalated into an unacceptable level. The exchange involved unwarranted aggression and intimidation tactics directed at our coaching staff. He was literally in her face, pointing his fingers, telling her, "You need to sit there, be quiet, don't you say a word," things of that nature. Furthermore, this alarming behavior extended to the authorities, which were called when they wanted to eject our coach, and he ran with his hand on his holster, which is very alarming, and the superintendent that called him over, that we did not know was the superintendent at the time, that called the authorities over to remove our coach. The AD was there, the superintendent was there. They showed no concern for any of our players, any of our coaching staffs, until the game of basketball was at risk. Once our coach felt that the environment was unsafe, that the players were unsafe, she did what she was supposed to do as a head coach. She sent everyone to the locker room, told us that she was going to call the AD and inform him about the situation. As that was occurring, the AD came up to me, the superintendent and the AD actually came up to me and told me that at this time they did agree with the officiating and that they were going to report them to the WIAA, but if we did not play the game, they would be reporting us to the WIAA. I found out that it was a parent day for their school, so this game meant a lot. They had their younger team there, they had a lot of players there, so the game of basketball meant a lot to them. Not the coaching staff, not how our players were treated, not how the officiators treated us, but the game of basketball that the parents were there to watch. At that time, and ever since then, I have questioned myself as a man, as a leader, and as a protector. Having my 10-year-old daughter in that situation, having female staff, and having female players, I'm one of the only males that they see on a day-to-day basis as far as team-wise goes. So that experience of not being able to protect them and bring them to the school to just play basketball has left me very unsettled. I've questioned myself, like I said, throughout the day, at night, about what I could have done better, how could I have prevented this, and I would like to tell my group of staff members and players at this time, I really appreciate you guys for handling the situation the way that you should, which is the right way. But I hope our board members, everyone that is watching, understands how hurtful this situation was, and we right this situation. Right it not only for us, but for generations to come, people that come behind us, because I don't want any students, any coaches, or anyone, for that matter, to ever have to go through something like that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Earl did go over his time. If there's somebody else in the audience to fill out the card to yield the time to balance that out for us. Just need someone else to fill out a card. Is there any more public comment? Okay. So at this point in our public comment, I just want to acknowledge that the Board of Education, that we have heard and we do understand the players and the coaches as you have expressed yourself today. Because this is an open investigation, I know a lot of time has passed in terms of days, but in terms of school time, with that happening right before the break, and today being the first day back, the way that things work is Dr. Garrison, who handles our day-to-day operations, he and Mr. Dupuy, they're at that level in resolving the matters and working through that. So at this time, there's, this is not a noticed item on the agenda also, but the public comment is a place for people to come make things known. So we have heard you, and we understand what you're saying, and Dr. Garrison and Mr. Dupuy will be following up as things come. All right. All right, so we're now on to 3A, Superintendent Board Report.
All right, first of all, let me just say to everyone that's in the room, thank you for coming out. I think at times we just need to acknowledge that space. Thank you for taking the time out in your day. To the parents, to the coaches, to the student athletes, of course. Thank you for coming out and expressing your truth. It's not easy to get up and come to a mic and share your thoughts or your beliefs. I know that just being sitting here right now. And so I want to thank you all for coming out and again expressing your concern, your thoughts around this situation. It does have its place. I think, when it comes to public comment, excuse me, I think when it comes to public comment, we forget that we do want to provide this space for these conversations to happen in an open setting. And so I hope that you didn't feel as if you couldn't come, or if you feel like if you couldn't share or if you couldn't speak. That's not the atmosphere that we want to create. And so hopefully you were able to, express your truths in a way in which we all, I know I heard very clearly. As Mr. Levy has already mentioned, this is an open investigation. And so that's kind of where we have to leave that space. But I don't want you all to think for a second that I don't appreciate you all coming out and expressing, where you are right now, okay? That's coming from not just me as the superintendent, but Willie. It's coming from me. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out and doing what you did tonight. Now that's a hard transition to go into my other part of my superintendent's report, but I didn't want to go into my regular superintendent's report without acknowledging you all and being in this space. Okay. So going into my other superintendent's report, it's natural that I say this to everybody in the room: Happy New Year. I know that that's a space as well. Some of us haven't seen each other since last year, and so that's the going joke that I've been stating all day is, I haven't seen some of y'all since last year. And so, Happy New Year to the 2024 school year, for all of our families, for all of our students, for all of our it's okay, for all of our students, for all of our families. Thank you. For all of our students, for all of our families, for all of our staff, for all of everybody in the school district of Beloit, I would like to say again, Happy New Year 2024. And I also would like to remind everybody that you do have the rest of this month to make the mistake in writing the number 23. But after that, you're gonna have to do better and making sure you write the number 24 down when it's time. We've had some great things that have happened over the past, few months. And again, I'm not going to recap all of what has transpired. As we prepare for this new year, we still have challenges that we have to face. And part of my responsibility as a district administrator is not only to set the tone around where we are right now, but also where we want to go. And hopefully in the next few months, the next few weeks, we'll continue to have a clear picture of where we are going in the school district of Beloit, which I do believe is moving continuously towards continuous improvement. And I've shared this before, and I will share it again in my superintendent's report, that I made it very clear when I came here that I want to be about three main things: continuous improvement, service at the highest level, and student achievement. And those three things is how I operate. I don't move often off of those themes. I really stick to those themes very closely. So when things come at me in many different ways as a district administrator, I try to keep my focus there. And so as a school district and as a board, my focus is remain steady. It remains steady in those three themes around continuous improvement. That's getting better in everything that we're doing here in the school district. Service at the highest level. What are we doing for others? And making sure that people feel that our services is at the highest level. And then naturally student achievement. And one could couch that as the reason why we all get up in the morning and come to our school district, or in this case, our place of work. And so, again, I remain very, focused on that goal for the school district, but I also want to make sure that as a staff, we understand that importance as well. And this is almost like my, superintendent's address for the beginning of the year, but, and I won't be too long after that. To the staff, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I know that with the, dedication that we have to you and your dedication that you have to, of course, our students and our families, that we can reach the goals in which we have all set out to do. To the administration staff, I would like to also say we got a lot of work to do. But again, I believe we can reach those same goals that we all set out to do, especially when we are working together. To the board, I want you all to know that it is our responsibility and your responsibility to keep holding us accountable for the conversations in which we need to move forward in. It's very clear that we have a strategic plan, and I have tried to address some of the needs in our strategic plan. I will continuously do that as a district administrator. And so I'd like to thank you for your partnership in this conversation as well. To the community and to the parents, I know there may be some times in which we may agree, and there may be some times in which we may not agree. But overall, I hope that there are more times where we agree than when we don't. And so hopefully as a parents and as a community at large, that you hear that very loud and clear, that there may be times where we definitely will agree, and there may be some times when we don't, but hopefully we'll agree more than we don't. And so that's my thoughts for, everybody that's in the school district for the school year. Again, I didn't want to make it a much longer conversation due to time, and we do have a guest tonight, but I also wanted to make sure I touched based on some of those thoughts. We also have some other great things that's happening in the school district right now. We've been given some donations from stainless tank and equipment. That's just recently came in. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations have been given to our students and materials in this area. Thank you to the stainless tank and equipment for those donations. Employees at the Woodmans and Beloit generously donated items including school supplies, personal hygiene products, blankets, winter wear, snacks, and much more of our unaccompanied and homeless youth program. And so, again, thank you to the employees at Woodmans for their generous donations. I don't want to get this wrong, but is it Nielsen family? Is that right? Okay. The Nielsen family continued their annual art supply drive that started by Adam Nielsen 13 years ago. Thanks to their generosity and many community members, students at Merrill and Todd were able to pick out 2 art supplies to take home and enjoy. They believe in the positive impact of art and creativity it has on a child's life. And so, again, those donations, I do want to bring note to today, amongst some of many other things that we are working towards. But I want to make sure that I brought some attention to some of those donations that happened over, over the holiday season. That concludes my superintendent's report, and I just want to make sure I put some of that thanks into the room as well.
Board members, any questions? No questions? All right.
All right.
3B, School Perceptions Community-Wide Survey Review.
So as we continue, that was pretty loud. So as we continue to prepare for the referenda here in 2024, one of the things that we want to do is, again, just kind of recap kind of where we are at this current time. Naturally, back in September, late September, we went to the board, and of course the board made the unanimous decision to support us going to referendum through resolution. Naturally, from there, October and going into November, we were able to gather some data, put together some numbers, and really start looking at, what does that look like for us in the 2024 operational referendum campaign. With that being stated, we were able to get a survey out and start in late November. That survey was extended through December, and we still have, surveys that were mailed in that we're, taking a look at, and we were trying to update that presentation that you have before you right now. One of the things that I want to be very clear about is that, we did a little different than what we did in the past as it pertains to having an ad hoc committee, by really leaning into the conversations with the community and gathering their input and their thoughts as it pertains to a referenda. The referenda will cover, three major topics or three major budgetary concerns that the survey asks our families to consider: a $9 million question, $11 million question, and a $12.8 million question. $12.8 million threshold that we wanted people to consider. With that being stated, we've had over 1,600 or so or more surveys that have came in. That number is higher than what we've had in other school perception survey. And Mr. Demuse will be able to share more in detail about that in his presentation. My hopes is that in today's presentation, we capture, what the community is thinking, all the while knowing that, again, as people have mailed in their survey results, that we are still kind of, updating the presentation as needed. So this is a snapshot as of today, where we are, and we wanted to make sure that we gave you all the most accurate information as it pertains to the data in which we were able to glean from the community's thought process in this referenda. So without further ado, I hope that hopefully that gave a good enough snapshot, cabinet. What you think? Yes? Good enough snapshot of kind of where we are right now. And I would like to turn it over to Mr. Demuse, who has been online waiting in the waiting room. So, Mr. Demuse, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Can you do me a favor and lean a little closer to the mic, because I want to make sure we're able to hear you as well.
Yeah, I think it's attached to my headphones here, so I can talk loud.
Okay, that's better. Thank you so much.
Just so I know from your end, are you looking at a screen or just what's on the paper, or both?
We're looking at both. So we see what's on the screen,
Okay.
and we have it also in paper.
Okay, great. So let's hop in. First thing I want to do is take you through what colors are in your report.
Mr.
Blue is going to be
Muse,
the
I'm
least
sorry.
interesting.
Mr. Muse, 1 second. My apologies. Board, the presentation that I have for you, if you would like to ask questions as we go, or would you like to ask questions at the very end? I know it gets a little difficult sometimes when the presenter is there and we're here, and so I want to make sure I gather kind of what you want to do. All right, so Mr. Muse, just to let you know before you get started, we'll take the questions as they go. So if you would be so kind to kind of pause in between slides, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Sure. So blue is going to be your least interesting. There's nothing new on the blue slides. It's either going to be a review of who we are, or all of the text and images that were in your survey are also in this report. We do that on purpose. The survey is fresh in your mind now, but it may not be a couple of weeks, a couple of months down the road. And we don't want you to have to dig up a previous copy of the survey. So everything that was in there is also in here for kind of a one-stop shop for you. And we won't spend too much time on that since this survey window did just finish up. And I trust you all took it. The yellow is your demographic section. So who took your survey? We will obviously spend some time in the green. That's your results and analysis. And then as we're going through, or certainly at the end, I will leave some time for wrap-up and questions. I've had the opportunity to present to your board now, I think all the way back to 2020, I think was the first time I met with you. That was back in person, I think, for your annual board development tool report. And I think I've been with you at least once every school year since. So I don't want to spend too much time on who we are. I want to get to the good stuff, which is your survey specifically. As you just heard, your survey is hot off the presses in terms of the quantitative data that you have in front of you. It is 8:05, so 4 hours ago it was updated. So you're looking at very, very fresh data. The survey deadline being December 29th, we may still get a few stragglers in through the mail, and we want to be sure that we honor that data. At the same time, I think your results are going to stay pretty flat here. Those respondents being in total 1,752, which is about 40%-ish more than what you had last time around when I worked with you two school years ago in 21-22. You had about 1,100 in that community survey. So that's great news, more engagement via the survey than last time around. 12% response rate is pretty normal for a community your size. I just worked with a couple of districts in far northern Wisconsin whose populations are measured in a couple of hundred. So it doesn't take very much for their survey response rate to soar. You're in one of the biggest communities in Wisconsin. So 12% is pretty normal for a community your size, and just reflecting on those total number of respondents. As I saw the data come in, it really quiets down after about 500 or so in your community. It's kind of noisy during the first couple of hundred. People are varying in the responses. Even as I updated this with probably a difference of about 100 or so surveys that we got through the post office over the last couple of days, your survey data changed by about 0.2 percentage point. So this is very quiet, it's very steady, which gives me good indication that you have pretty predictive data. And by the way, I just dwell on that for a second, because that is one of the things that we hang our hat on at School Perceptions, is our accuracy rate. For us, an accurate prediction means that if the data tells us that a referendum is going to pass, and you take that plan to ballot and it passes, that is an accurate prediction. That is a success in our world. But the flip side of that coin is also true. If a district, if the data tells us that a referendum is not going to pass, but a district takes that plan to referendum anyhow, which does occasionally happen, and that plan fails, that's a success in our world, because that is an accurate prediction. And that is what we are in the business of doing, is giving you an accurate prediction based on what your data says, to be a voice for your taxpayers. Finally, then, the last note on this screen is a number that I want you to keep in mind, or if you have a pen and paper in front of you, you may want to jot it down, and feel free to round it to 2.4. Otherwise, your specific statistical margin of error is 2.39%. What that means is, depending on the size of your community and how many respondents you have, you're the benefit of being in a fairly large community, which means that the more respondents you have, the tighter that margin of error gets. But just know that as we move forward and look at some of these percentages, it could be 2.4% less than what we're looking at, or 2.4% greater than what we're looking at. And that's not a you thing, that's not a School Perceptions thing, that's not a Beloit thing. That is strictly a function of numbers here. How many people are in your community, and how many people are taking your surveys. In terms of demographics, one of the things that I look at here, and in fact, I'm going to bring up some numbers on my other screen to make sure that I get this data 100% accurate. There are a couple of places that my eyes go to when I look at this slide. First being your senior citizens, the bar of 65 plus. I really want to make sure that we're capturing that age group, because they're such loyal voters. They're going to be overrepresented at the polls, which means, to give you good, accurate, predictive data, we also want them to be overrepresented in your survey results, and they are. When you look at the boundaries of your school district, so not just the city of Beloit, but including the city of, but also the town of Beloit and the town of Turtle, 13.8% of your community is 65 plus. Over 1/3, 38% of your community, of your survey takers, are 65 plus. That's a good thing in our world, knowing that they're going to be overrepresented at the polls. That is also something we'll hang our hat on in order to get you good predictive results. And certainly not for nothing, by nature of maybe being retired, they're also going to be in a fixed income, so we have to know what they're thinking. The other places where it's very natural to see a little bit of overrepresentation is the age ranges between 35 and 54, for two reasons. That's a prime parenting age, and it's prime working age. So much of your staff will also be included in those bars. And that's not a bad thing, because if staff and parents aren't taking school surveys, I don't know who would. So you're overrepresented there, and that's what I would expect to see by nature of doing a school-related survey. Next up, we asked, is your primary residence in the district? 86% of folks said yes. Why do we ask this question? There are people who get your survey that don't live in your district, and that is not a mistake. Your staff could commute from elsewhere. There is no requirement for them to live within the district's boundaries. But by nature of having a staff email address, they get this survey. Any parent who chooses to open enroll their child into the district by definition doesn't live there, or they wouldn't need to open enroll in. They get the survey because they have a parent email address on file. Finally, if I have property, if I have a mailbox, if I have a PO box, but it's not my primary address, I might also get the survey. All of those things are perfectly fine in our world. You may have staff that, have been in your district for 40 years and are incredibly influential, even though they don't live there, and they bring all kinds of votes one way or the other for the district. We want to know what they think. At the same time, though, if I don't live there, if I don't live near you, I can't vote there, which means my influence is capped, which means that on many of the analyses moving forward, we are going to focus on the 86% that said yes, because they are the ones that have the opportunity to control an election within your school district's boundaries. Next up, to that point of municipality, where people are living, over 9 in 10 of your survey respondents said the city of Beloit, 6% that said the town of Beloit, and 2% said they live in the town of Turtle. Next up, 2 questions that we'll look at for desegregation purposes in just a moment. 77% of folks said they are not employed by you, and 82% of folks said they do not have a child currently attending a school in the district. The reason we do this is in just a few moments, we're going to look at how staff are feeling about your potential plans. We'll look at how parents are feeling about the potential plans. And then we'll look at the no here, the non-parents, non-staff, and I'll talk about that more in just a moment. And then finally, if you want to know how parents are feeling, but they don't yet have kids in school, you'll be able to do that by this final question as well, and your administration team is able to slice and dice this data too. Next up are your blue slides. So this is what I mentioned early on, where there is no additional information. This is exactly word for word, image for image, what was in your survey. So talked about a few of the financial challenges facing the school district of Beloit. Some comparisons to where your mill rate is vis-a-vis the state. The comparisons to other schools in the conference based on when this survey went to print. When this went to print, all data was not available by the GPI, but we put in where your mill rate was for this particular school year. And then also noted that you have not secured funding through this type of operational referendum, whereas 70% of school districts in Wisconsin have. And then we got into the options. So once again, we noted that the mill rate that you as the Board of Ed approved earlier on was $3.96. Option 1 explained the total amount of money, $9 million, which is something we absolutely want people to see now, because that's the number they're going to see in a ballot when they step into the ballot box. At the same time, that number means nothing to me as a taxpayer, as a survey respondent, until that can be translated into how much is this going to cost me based on how much property value I have. So we translate that $9 million into a mill rate difference, and then this $215 or $18 per month is what people will see per year for every $100,000 of property value if we're looking at the $215. And then we want to be transparent about what you're planning to use those dollars for. So we had option 1. We had option 2, very similar format. Total ask $11 million, what you would do with the money, a mill rate impact of $2.88 or $288 per year per 100K. And then finally, the third option that the district crafted was $12.8 million. That is an impact on the mill rate of $353 or $353 per year for every 100K for $30 a month or so. And here's your big slide. So the question read, which referendum option should the district pursue? And here we're only looking at people that can control an election within your district's boundaries. These are residents only that are encapsulated on this slide. I want to begin with the top row, non-parents, non-staff. The reason I begin with them is most people in your community will be fed into that bar. About 75% of the community are non-parents, non-staff. So most folks are there. Your parents are kind of in the middle. Obviously, they're highly engaged, highly connected, very passionate by nature of being parents. They're about 25% of the community. Your staff, they're very influential. They are the ones that get stopped at the grocery store or at the post office, waiting in line for popcorn at the concession stand. But they're the fewest people of these 3 bars here that are fed into that bar. About 1% of the community is staff. So even though these bars are the same width, bear in mind that there are not the same number of people that are feeding each. So I want to begin with the upper left. What this is telling me here is if the school district of Beloit were to put option 3 on the ballot, which is the most expensive option, less than 1/4 of the largest group of your community would be willing to support option 3. Then we can do some cumulative addition here. So the logic is, if I'd be willing to support option 3, which is the most expensive, I'm also willing to support something that's cheaper than that. If I'm willing to pay the most expensive, I'm also willing to pay something cheaper. If I can support option 3, I can stomach option 2. If I can stomach option 2, I can support and stomach option 1. So what I do here then is some simple math to say, well, how low do we need to go then until we cross this black line, the 50% threshold? That black line isn't crossed for non-parents, non-staff. A majority of non-parents, non-staff aren't reached at even the cheapest option of option number 1. That comes to 48% total. Parents, though, are a little bit more supportive. They are willing to support option 2, that middle option. Staff are just about split between option 1 and option 2. So again, the logic of this slide is if I'm willing to support something that's more expensive, I'm willing to support something cheaper, and then I do this addition, and then I see where's the 50% sweet spot, the 50% plus 1 that the school district of Beloit would need to see a referendum pass. I did the same analysis, I used the same question, I used the same data, but this is kind of a preferred way for me to read it because I think the data gets a bit more nitty-gritty and it's a bit easier for me to understand. What this is saying, again, is a slightly different way to package the same data. Option number 3, the most expensive option. Parents were supportive at 39%, but they're a quarter of the community. So we need to put a 0.25 in front of them and weight that support appropriately. Non-parents, non-staff came in at 24% support for the most expensive option. They're 3/4 of the community, which is why they get a 0.75 in front. So when I complete this equation, what this bold underlined number is telling me on the right is if the school district of Beloit were to put option 3 on the ballot today, approximately 27.8% of the community would support that on a ballot. Then I did the same exercise. It does, however, remain below 50%. If the school district of Beloit were to put option 2 on the ballot, 44% of the community would be willing to support it. If the school district of Beloit puts option 1 on the ballot, which is the cheapest of the 3, that crosses majority. It is 51.3% supported, but I do want to caveat that with that number that you may have jotted down at the beginning. That is within the margin of error at, I believe I said it was 2.39% or about 2.4 if you round it. Option 1 is your knife's edge. This is your gamble. This is your 50-50 split. Once you do that margin of error, it could be as high as 53.4%, or it may drop below majority support into that failure territory, something below 50%. Again, that margin of error is not a function of anything that you can do or control. It's a function of the size of your community and the number of people who chose to take the survey. What this is telling me in summation, option 3 and option 2 are not supported by your voters at this time. Option 1 has the most support of the 3 options, but it is right now sitting on a knife's edge. I do have a few more bits of your survey to unpack. Let me pause here, though, since this was kind of the meat and potatoes of your survey. What questions do you have about this data here?
Board members' questions. I'll kick them off. So looking at, like you said, the error, the margin of error being plus or minus 2.39, that, like you said, is kind of a 50-50. again, you're saying the validity of the survey or the tool is that something like those that took the time to take the survey are approximately kind of like those that would take the time to go to the poll and vote?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And the reason we know that, I'll try to make this a short story, but there are districts who chose to do, or sometimes choose to do non-anonymous surveys. People actually put in their name. I don't normally recommend that, but there have been districts that have done that. What that allows us to do is kind of create a natural experiment where then later on, you can look at voter lists and basically say, for the people who took the survey, are they the same people who are also there on election day? And that middle of that Venn diagram is pretty wide. The pool is pretty much the same. So that's why I have pretty good confidence in the folks that are taking your survey mirror quite well the people that will be there on April 2nd or 5th, whatever that is.
It's question time. What Mr. Demuse has summarized for us is that we're at option 1, is the one that has gained 51.3%. We also have to factor in the margin of error, plus or minus. So the $9 million option is where he's at, and he's answering questions now.
Perfect. I'll jump in. One, thank you so much for joining us. You always provide helpful information. My question is, do school perceptions have the capacity, using the data that you've collected, to advise us on messaging that may help increase support for referendum options?
The short answer is no, but that's an intentional no. So we as a business are very careful about giving you the data that your taxpayers are saying, but if there's anything related to communications about referendum passage, that is very much not our world. Otherwise, we get accused of not being unbiased arbiters, third-party natures of the data. We really want to tell you like it is. We want to tell you what the no people are saying, what the yes people are feeling, but we really have to draw a pretty thick line in the sand once we try to sway voters, because that's really, there are, I think, are people that do that, but that is not something we want to do. Otherwise, we get accused of being the referendum passage people, when in reality, we just want to be the voice of what your taxpayers are saying. So that's a very intentional delineation of our work, where we don't do a lot of messaging and communication. What I will say, just from a very broad perspective, is more information is never a bad thing. You know, specifics on what you're going to do with the money, you know, even down to the nitty gritty of what is a mill rate and what does that mean. These are terms that oftentimes come up for the very first time on a survey, and nobody thinks in terms of mill rates. Nobody does. That's why we have to be really careful about translating what a mill rate is into actual dollar amounts. So I would say information never hurts, and in general, support increases as something gets cheaper. Beyond that, you know, I get a little nervous because I don't want to be accused of being unbiased when that's really where our world lies.
No, and I completely appreciate and respect that response. However, if we need to do this process again in November, because for some reason the referendum doesn't pass on April 2nd, is school perceptions opposed to enhancing the survey so that we can ask questions of along the lines of what additional information are you looking for? Or, you know, see what I'm saying? So it's not you all crafting a message for us, but it's getting more data that we may be able to discern that on our own.
Yeah, in that case, the answer is 100% yes. And in fact, that's kind of what we usually do the day after, is answer a bunch of phones that people say, this failed and I want to know why. You know, and I'm certainly not saying that's going to happen, but in the event that it does, we call those our postmortem surveys, and we go back right away pretty quickly and say, you know, we heard you, we acknowledge and respect the community's decision. Help us understand a bit more nuance of why you chose to vote the way that you did, and we can have a list of reasons, and usually it's a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data. We can craft a pretty good list of, you know, you tell us what the primary reasons were to vote no, and then we can better reflect those positions in another referendum if that's what the community is telling us. So that's a long way of saying, yes, we do that, but typically that's kind of after the process to learn more about what happened.
Perfect. So my final question at this point, I'm assuming the thing you just described, or at least I'm hoping, happened after our most recent failed referendum. And where does that data lie?
We were not hired to do that. I haven't worked with you since 21-22.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a little bit of clarity. In our last presentation, so they did school perceptions. When we worked with them in this process, they showed us, we did a community survey, this is before Dr. Kieser left, because one of those questions were, what are things you would tell the new superintendent? And that goes back to like when we had to craft a referendum and we were minus the facility study. There's the partner we had there did not provide that information. And then afterwards, you know, so that's all that sequence of time that went forward. So as we go into this referendum, we do now have this information, which is a tool we did not have when we went into the last referendum. What we knew going into last referendum is that we're projecting that we're going to have to make some cuts and some changes to right size, which we did, and we were asking for help then because we knew that if help did not come then, we would have to ask for help again. So we've already asked for that, and we have the data to kind of show us before where we're going to be at. Is Rob, when you, let's say 51 is hope, right?
Yep.
So like if that was 48, what would you be saying to us? Or let me, if that was 46, what would you be, yeah, if that was 46, what would you be saying to us right now?
If it was at 46, 47, somewhere in that range, I would probably say that you're still kind of on the precipice. And I would say that it's close enough where you put it on the ballot and you let voters make the final call, which really isn't all that different than what I would tell you here. You know, as you breach that 50% threshold, which you did, albeit in the margin of error, but you did, you know, I think it would be a wasted opportunity to not put something on the ballot, but the next conversation would be, you know, what exactly is that number? And are we going to retool some of our plans, or are we going to take a chance at the 9 million? But whatever you decide, again, just bear in mind that, you know, as we were talking earlier on about the months, you get 2 cracks at the nut per calendar year. So whatever you decide to do for April, regardless of whether that passes or fails, you get one more chance to come back to the voters in November before the clock resets again on January 1st. So I guess the direct answer to your question is, even if it were a few points lower, I would tell you to take a shot. But bear in mind that it may have to come down in price before the chances went up. But that's a direct answer to your question if it were lower.
Okay, so just ask a question into clarity. So like 9 is what was asked about, but if we start to go that process, but if there was 5 million or 7 million, something less than 9, it could possibly be something to push it over the edge. But we know we have a math number that we need also, though.
Right. So the lowest the survey went was 9 million. So, you know, whether it's 8.95 or 5 million or 3 million or, you know, $10, you know, whatever that, we know that in general, as the number gets cheaper, support will go up. But what that number is to get you outside of the margin of error is not something that this particular survey tested. It began at 9.
Okay, other board members, questions? All right, we're ready to move to the next section.
All right, and there's not too much left here, so continue to noodle if you got something that you're thinking about. We did note then, if voters don't support a referendum, you may need to explore budget cuts, and while you as district leaders don't endorse or recommend any of the following items in the survey, you're considering all options. So these are these cost-cutting scores. So a couple of just general notes about this slide. All of the questions here were prefaced with, should the district ... So should the district delay? Should the district reduce? Should the district increase? And so on down the line. If I answered something and I said, yes, I want you to cut that thing, my score was given a weight of 10. If as a survey respondent I said, no, I don't want you to cut that thing, my score was given a weight of 1. So the middle of that range then is 5.5. So when I'm scanning this data for the very first time, that's what I'd like you to do as well, is just glance at these numbers and find items that are above or below 5.5. But we're looking at the same constituent groups now that we're familiar with. So we got your staff, you got your parents and caregivers, and you got your non-parents, non-staff. One number reaches 5.5. So again, the higher the number, the more that group wants you to cut that thing. The one and only one number that reaches 5.5 is your staff saying that we could consider delaying curriculum updates, but that's the only one from any group. There is only other one that crosses the 5 threshold, so it's still leaning towards no. That's delaying technology upgrades. But this is where you're using this data to say, if we need to make cuts, this is what our community is telling us they want us to do. The highest number from parents and caregivers is delaying technology upgrades. The highest numbers for your non-parents, non-staff are in the world of technology, transportation services, and curriculum updates. So in the event that you need this, this is where you would begin. And again, the higher the number, the more that group wants you to cut that area.
I have a question. So thank you. So Rob, and I'm keeping this really simple because that's how I like to, I'm keeping this really simple. Is this telling us that of the public that took the time to take that survey, they're really not excited currently about giving us money for the district? However, they also don't want cuts. Am I reading that accurately?
That is correct. Well,
Awesome.
let me make the caveat that they don't want you to make cuts in these areas that are listed here. Obviously, there are all kinds of fund balances and all kinds of things that play into your budget. So I guess let me make that answer careful is there are some that aren't enthusiastic about raising their taxes, but they are saying, no, we don't want you to cut these things that you're seeing on the screen.
And bear with me because I'm reading through this for the first time. Is there a reason that staff, which is our largest, the largest expense of any district, is not listed on there? Or it is and I'm missing it upon my first scan?
Yeah, we couldn't fit in everything here. Usually cutting staff, well, I guess you have different employee classifications, but usually that's related to
increased class size?
Class sizes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
Thank you.
By the way, that's it for me. My only other slide was questions. So if you do have anything else, by all means, let me know.
So, okay, sure. So, one of the things about the survey, thank you, Mr. Demuse, for your presentation. He wanted to be here in person, but he was grabbed a little bit before I was able to book him back in December. And so thank you for at least obliging today's conversation and then being on a tight turnaround as pertains here in January 3rd, right after the New Year's, and again, Happy New Year's to you as well. When you're thinking about the survey, again, this is a snapshot of the respondents of who took the survey, right? And naturally, there's multiple people that probably want to take the survey, didn't take the survey, didn't send it in, that is not captured in this snapshot. When I first had the conversation, I was thinking about this. I'm also looking at that undecided population. And so if you could please go back to about 4 slides, 5, 6, yeah, that one. I'm looking at that undecided group, and it says 30% of staff that is undecided as it pertains whether or not we should go to referendum, and there's 12% of our parents that believe that we should go to referendum undecided, and then non-parents and non-staff that is undecided that we have to look at as well. And my goal is, again, in a referendum is to make sure that people have the information to make an informed decision. at the polls. We know that our staff don't make up a huge percentage of our voting population here in the school district of Beloit. However, they are very important to the conversation. The same with the parents, and the same with the non-parent and non-staff groups. And so I just wanted to make sure that when we look at this slide, it kind of gleans my reflection to, making sure that we have the right information in front of people to make those numbers slide towards, in this case, the left, right? That's the goal there. And if you go back an additional 2 slides, Mr. Demuse, if you don't mind, please. That one, sorry. 1 slide. When I'm looking at this slide, one of the things that I was struggling with just in general, thinking about, this tonight's presentation was, when you see the 51% and you think about our margin of error, it's not to say that, our minds typically goes towards, what may not happen or the possibilities around what if it doesn't. I'm very optimistic in my approach to a lot of different things, and I believe that, with the right information in people's hands, we will make an informed decision that'll better position our school district to be able to, do the things that we need to do. The $9 million mark in our earlier conversation at the business meeting, we talked about what $9 million could possibly look like from a projection perspective. We know it doesn't meet all of our needs, but that $9 million will give us a line of support in which we definitely still need here in the school district. We didn't come in at the 11%, which was the 44 there, and we didn't meet the threshold with the 12.8, which is 27%. But what this does tell me is that with the margin of error there, I'm optimistic that we can be in the 53 range. I would like to be in the 60 range, right? But our goal is again to get the information into the voters' hands, and so that they will have an informed decision to make, at the polls come April the 2nd. There's a lot of work that's yet to be done. Naturally, the crafting of the question will happen next week on January 11th. But from there, there's a lot of work that our district will be embarking on, as well as the board, to make sure that the word is out and that to make sure that we are able to cross, the finish line with a past referenda. We also know that, and I'm just going to say this too. We also know that we have the responsibility to our students in this conversation, and just like last time, I'm willing to do, all of what it takes to get the information out, so we can make an informed decision. But at the end of the day, it's up to the voters, and I have to be mindful of that, because it's a lot of work that goes into any referenda, let alone a second one for our school district. And so I would like to thank all of the people who did take the time to fill out their survey and send it in. I'd like to thank all of the conversations that's had up until this point. I still have another community conversation, I believe next week at the library, so please come out if you have additional conversations. This information will be there since we have it readily available, so I will be able to present some of this information in the next conversation, but it's not going to negate the presentation that we already have prepared as well. We will be doing other sessions, my cabinet and I, to get the word out, to get more explanation around, what does this actually mean. But overall, it is my goal to make sure people have the information to make informed decisions, so that we be able to move forward as a board. And so I just want to make sure I put that space into the conversation, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, Mr. Demuse, can you go back one more time to which referendum option should the district pursue? And yeah, I think, like I said, overall, when we look at these numbers, it does put us in a, it does, as a board member, kind of puts you in a, all right, you're looking at what we're looking at, But like I said, taking another look in for our parents, there's 61% support there by our parents. And I know that what percentage that makes up of, the total voting community, but the parents have expressed that these are the things that they want for their children. And like I said, we have got, where our staff percentage is, and then our community to work that out. So like you said, that that additional information is there. And as Mr. Demuse showed us, that you're at 51, take your plus or minus and figure it out. So we'll take our time there.
So I just want to jump in and say that I am super excited by this data. Hear me out. We are close. And the thing that gives me the thing that I'm most hopeful about is the do not cut list. Because for me, we need to show our community what a balanced budget looks like in the absence of a referendum. Because that's going to show our cut list. And if this is not appealing to you, this is how you can prevent that. And it's not trying to scare people or doomsday, it's just reality. Because if our fund balance hits zero, our district looks very different in every way imaginable. So for me, that's the next step. We have to show our community what a balanced budget looks like in the absence of a past referendum. And I think that is going to be the most powerful driver of a successful referendum. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it could also be, oh, sorry, Ms. Johnson. Sorry, I see you.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to use the hand gesture. I know you guys can't always see me down here. But I'm wondering, Rob, were there any written comments or side margin notes that maybe you can categorize and share if a board member is on the fence, or if somebody is on the fence, that might help give us a little bit broader perspective?
100%, yes. And in fact, that's what we're working on right now. So I met with some of your admin team yesterday and got the go-ahead to produce a comment theme analysis for the district. So what that does is, in order to ensure confidentiality by your survey respondents, what we do at School Perceptions is read through the comments several times, actually, and kind of do a, we call it a comment theme analysis, but really more of like a lesson learned. Like, what are people saying about the cost-cutting options? What are we learning from why they said what they did? You know, if they said yes, here's why they want to cut it. If they said no, here's why they don't want to cut it. And it gives some more nuance into why people are saying what they are. So yeah, you're set to get that probably early next week, I would say by about Monday or so. And I'll be sending it off to your admin team to better understand what are we learning from the comments. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does give us information to figure what direction we'll take. And like I said, you put this together with the Baird model and looking at, what's modeled out. That does line up choices there and other options. So it's information that we need. Mr. Nichols has a raised hand. You got to unmute yourself.
Board President Levy, just a question for me, and I guess Megan, will we be getting a hard copy of this presentation since we're not there in person?
So I do have a hard copy for you. Naturally, we also, of course, everything's recorded, and so the presentation will be able to be uplinked. You'll be able to link it and see it on the YouTube. I do have a copy for you, a hard copy here. We can mail it to you, or you can come by and pick it up.
I'll just pick it up. Thank you, Dr. Garrison.
Not a problem.
All right, thank you, Mr. Demuse. All right, Mr. Demuse, thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good night. Take care.
Find myself in the agenda. All right. Now on to committee reports. And, no one has met this year except the Business Operations and Finance Committee.
Well, then let's talk about that.
Okay.
We met earlier today, just reviewed October and November financials, got a sneak peek at the audit that'll come. We'll get another good look at that and a good discussion on that coming up. both at a committee level and the full board. So that'll be some interesting things. I talked about some upcoming RFP proposals that are going to be hitting the community and give us some more good information on what funds are needed to do what, and so we can make good decisions going forward on that front. And we'll meet again on February 6th.
Teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services, Megan's not here, so we'll move down. Governance, we haven't met yet. Some agenda items we will be talking about, maybe forming a committee of whole for some of our board committee meetings, or how we might process and do things. Just that we have, we adopted a structure to move ourselves through meetings with Dr. Kieser that fit for where we were at the time. We've had some conversation with Dr. Garrison about possibilities of how we might structure our committees to kind of cut down on some of the on the time that we need to meet and kind of how we function. But we'll talk about those things in governance. Better ways, more efficient ways to achieve our work. Legislative update, I believe Megan has, and then policy committee.
Policy Committee will meet next Wednesday on the 10th, which is a different date than most people might be used to. So meeting on the second Wednesday of the month, but still at 5:30. The agenda is being finalized and will be posted soon.
Okay. We're on to our consent agenda. Is there anybody who needs anything removed from the consent agenda? Okay, I'm not looking at the screen, so I'm checking for hands too. So I see no hands. We'll toggle back. All right, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, the motion passes unanimously. We're on the future board meeting dates. Policy Committee meeting Wednesday, January 10th at 5:30 p.m. Note that is a change as we are making this adjustment for being here in the new year. Special board meeting for proposed referendum question writing Thursday, January 11th at 6 p.m. Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Tuesday, January 16th at 5:30 p.m. Human Resources January 16th at 6:30 p.m. And our regular board meeting Tuesday, January 16th at 6:30. Tuesday, January 16th at 7 p.m. State Education Conference Wednesday through Friday, January 17th through the 19th, 2024. No business will be conducted at the convention, but there will be, possibly could be a quorum of board members. And then governance, January 23rd at 5:30 p.m. And there will likely be, we'll have to schedule a special board meeting to handle a couple other things somewhere in there, compacted in the beginning of January. And so board members, look in your email for requests so we can get a meeting together. All right. Adjournment, is there a motion for adjournment at 8:49 p.m.?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy and seconded by Board Member Brian Nichols that we adjourn at 8:49 p.m. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned at 8:50 p.m. All right, good night.
That was exciting.